It's Friday, April 12th, 2024. We are back, and we have another guest host for this week, stepping in for Lando while he is off gallivanting somewhere. I don't even know where he is. I assume he's alive. He's texted me a few times. But anyway, stepping in, and I will say I'm about to fire him, though, because we're going to talk about a movie later that at his mention.
Okay.
Well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it, and you'll understand why. Although I that is unfair. I actually do want to talk about this film that we're going to get to later, because it is a fascinating movie to discuss for a lot of reasons. But before we get to that, let's do our promotional segment up front before I intro our guest host. And I am so delighted that now the promotional segment is simple. Just go to supporttheshow.com and everything is there. I don't have to rattle any more addresses off. I don't have to tell you to go and find this. It's all in one place. Because somehow, as I said on the last show, some fool allowed supporttheshow.com to be available as a cheap domain, and I have ensnared it. So it is mine now. And just go to that. Yes, it's amazing, isn't it? That somebody didn't have that. I checked it as a joke just to see how much they would want for it, because I do that with domains that I just expect to be gone. Sure enough, it came up and said, would you like it? It's $14 a year. And I said, yes, sir, madam, whatever. AI, I don't care. Skynet, I will take it. Yes. So now when people say, how do I support the show? Which nobody ever says. But if they do, I can now literally fucking reply, oh, easy. You can go to supporttheshow.com and everything's there. It's so amazing. Delighted to have that.
How do you let a web domain like that so many people can use, just let that go?
I originally was looking for I was going to try for supportthe.show, because I thought that would be kind of clever. I knew it would be a little more expensive, but I figured I'd try it. Yeah. But I forgot to put the dot. And then I was like, oh, screw it. Let me just see how much this thing is. Because I figured it'd be like, one of those $2,000 domains, because I see those all the time.
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah. Came right up and said available, and I said, fuck you, available, not anymore. Bang, and it's mine. So
because you have the domain poachers that just come in and grab all that shit, as soon as they see it.
And it's such a logical. I mean, every single. Okay, not every single. That's exaggerating. Many of the shows that all of us listen to, if you listen to podcasts, many of them say, "Here's how you can support the show." Those three words are used almost everywhere. So for those three words, .com to be available is Looney Tunes. Now, to anybody who doesn't get into domains and doesn't do any of this stuff, that may not seem that incredibly. I'm telling you, that's incredible. That's being available with .com. .com is the one that most people grab first. Then you get all the real .xyz and all that kind of stuff. Those tend to be more freeform. You can find those. But .com is kind of the gold standard relatively, or .org, depending on what you're doing. But .com is really the one for most private or non-governmental enterprises. .com is it, baby. That's what you want. So yeah, I saw it and I grabbed it. So I have it and it works and you can go to it. And I've tested it like 8 times to make sure somebody didn't prank me or NFT me or some weird thing. Nope, it's working. And my bank account hasn't been emptied, so I'm not the victim of a scam. Somehow I have acquired that. That's where you can go. So again, supporttheshow.com. It's all right there. Now let me intro my guest 3.5 minutes into the recording. He is a host of a couple, or co-host on a couple of different shows. Most people would best know him from Project Archivist, a friend of the show for quite a long time, Rojan, who has guest hosted and appeared on Oh, I don't even know how many episodes at this point, but you're probably
Usually the
person
ones I
who's come
find
back.
you, it's usually, hey, I've got this guest I want to talk to. They won't work for me, but they'll work for you. Okay, let's get, because I'm still working on a show for you right now, actually. I'm trying to
Yeah,
get
but
the
I think
guys on who made Disturbance in the Force on, but I haven't heard back from them yet.
look, I've had people that I haven't heard back from over a year, so it can take a while.
Yeah.
That's no problem. But I think you're probably the person who's been back on our show the most. I would be relatively sure that you would at least be one of the top two, if not the most recurring person who's been on. So, I'm always appreciative when you say yes, which you almost always do when you have the time. So, and there are a finite number of people that I know can do. We were talking about this before we started recording. Is people who understand what the podcasting setup is. A lot of people here, and they're like, "Oh, how hard could it be? It's just two people sitting there and talking for a couple hours." Try it. Mm-hmm. Try it with somebody for a while and try to keep it going for a while. It's not that simple, and not everybody is, I'm not going to say good, and I've never described myself as good at it, but there aren't many people who can keep that going and figure out how it works. So that's why a lot of shows, they get to about episode 50
like
and they evaporate.
a rhythm and a flow to conversation when you're doing podcasts.
Yeah.
And it's like I told you before we started, way back when I was starting podcasting, I took all of the shows that I liked, which was like You, Mysterious Universe, there was a show called The 13 Skulls, Eerie Radio, all these shows, and I'm like, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, so I'm going to get the equipment, and I'm going to do exactly what they do until I learn how all this stuff works, and then I'll start doing my own thing. And it's kind of like being in a band where like you're learning how to play an instrument, so you play other people's songs until you learn how to play the guitar or the drums or keyboards or whatever, and then you start writing your own music. You're like, okay, I know how this works now. And I learned the art of conversation, or the flow of conversation on podcasting through listening to you guys, because I was listening to you guys for I think good 4 or 5 years before I decided to fire my stuff up and get it running. So it's I know it's weird and cheesy, but you and a few other people are my podcasting heroes for the most part. I know that kind of probably blows your mind and stuff. But the other thing is they always
don't
say
believe
never
one fucking word out of your mouth, bro.
God, I love having a soundboard. Holy shit, do I love having a soundboard now.
I know, it's so great.
Good.
I haven't used mine yet. I've got one too. I use it when we're watching movies on the Cinema Labad group that I've got, but that's about it. But so we were talking beforehand about how having people on, sometimes they don't get the flow and ebb and flow of conversation. Like when you're just sitting talking with your friends and stuff, it's different. But when you're recording, you kind of have to allow time for both people to make their point and things like that. So when you're like, yeah, I need you to come on the show, I'm like, oh, this will be a piece of cake. Yeah, no problem. I could sit and talk and not have to edit and do anything, and somebody knows how to podcast and do stuff. Yeah, I'm there, no problem. Let's go.
Yeah, it is a lot easier when all you really have to worry about generally is either recording your own audio or doing nothing at all.
Exactly.
That does take a lot of the load off when you have to actually watch everything and make sure that a meter is running and that nothing crashes, or as happened to me the other night, my computer just went to a screensaver for no reason because I don't know what's going on with Macs and sleep settings, but they don't work right. So, every time I'm like, oh yeah, I've got it all right. It's like, no, do you? Let's find out. Shall we? Oh, fuck you.
You
How
sure?
about that? You got that right. So
let's see about that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So we had a whole, you suggested a whole slate of topics. I don't know which one you want to start with. We're going to save the movie review for the
let's
second
save
half.
that one for last.
Yeah, because that's going to go for a fucking while, let me tell you. So what would you like to start with of the different options that you brought up? I'm fine with any of them in any order. It doesn't matter to me.
Well, let's see here. There was another one which I wanted to bring up. I don't know if you guys have talked about the Zack Snyder not Star Wars movie or not, which was Rebel Moon. Have you watched that yet?
Yes, I did a review of that. I watched part 1. Part 2 is not out yet, right? I have not seen anything.
It's very
about
soon. I'm seeing the ads and stuff for it.
I'll watch it. I'm going to watch it. I will watch part 2. Because I found part. Did you watch part 1?
Yeah, I did, and it was okay. I didn't. I knew going into it what it was. It was supposed to be a Star Wars movie that never happened. So I knew when I watched it, it was like, well, that's very Star Wars-esque. That's very Star Wars-esque. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's supposed to be. This was supposed to be a Star Wars movie. So I didn't have that as a complaint about the movie. It just seemed,
I had other
I don't know.
complaints.
It seemed rushed to me, if that makes any sense. Like, it just seemed like the story was a little bit rushed, and I didn't even care that there was knockoff lightsabers in it, or anything like that. I was like, of course it's a Star Wars knockoff movie. So I was like, oh, they're sticking it to Disney or whatever. Okay, sure, whatever, gotcha. It was worth what I paid for it, which was what my subscription to Amazon is. So that's the way I look at it. I'm like, I don't know if I would have went and seen this in the movie theater, but since I'm already have Amazon Prime, it's on there. Sure, let's watch it, and maybe it'll be like a cotton candy popcorn kind of thing. It was okay, I didn't mind it, but I'm just, when part 2 comes out, I'm wondering if they're gonna like do something different with it or what have you, or for the most part. But when you're watching it, okay, this is only part 1. There's going to be a part 2. It's kind of like when the last Dune movies that came out,
Yeah, it's definitely a setup film. I was, as far as I remember, I was much in the same camp. I didn't expect it to be anything other than what it was, so I wasn't really let down. I don't know that I'll ever watch. I don't think I'll rewatch it before part 2 because I don't think I need to. It's such a Cliff Notes Star Wars that I remember enough that it's fine.
Yeah, I think that's the way I'm about it.
I thought a lot of people went a little overboard on criticizing it because partially I thought, well, have you seen a Zack Snyder film? Well, then you know what this is. I mean, what did you think it was going to be? He's not going to reinvent himself. He's never given an indication that he thinks that there's anything wrong with what he does, and that's okay. It's like Michael Bay. I don't expect Michael Bay to ever make a movie that I will find anything other than completely empty-brained.
Yeah.
Kevin Smith, same thing. Makes his movies the way he wants to make them. That's fine, but don't come into any of these filmmakers' movies and expect them to suddenly alter what they do. There are filmmakers who challenge themselves and try to make a lot of different films, and you know who they are because they make different genre films all the time. And then there's other people who stick to what they do. And that's not a criticism or an endorsement of either method. It's just a reality. Is if somebody hasn't said, well, with this film, I'm trying to do something different, then I don't know why anybody expects it to be different. And Zack Snyder has always been a visual filmmaker. He is clearly interested in what something looks like and how it moves visually, as opposed to coming up with a deep, inventive story.
Yeah,
that's his
I'll
whole
agree
thing.
with that.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just saying that don't come in expecting it to suddenly be, Stalker or Solaris, the original. It's not going to be. This is not what this guy does. He's not into deep philosophical, deliberations on the nature of humanity. He wants to slow motion have muscly, oiled people throwing themselves around. And hey, that's all right. I was entertained for, 2 hours, 2.5, whatever it was. I mean, it was watchable. And
I'm wondering if I think you've briefly talked about it on the show. I started this group on Facebook called Cinema Labad, and it was done completely as a lark, as a joke kind of thing, because me and a bunch of my buddies in the summertime, we would build a fire in the backyard. We have a big movie screen that we set up, and we watch bad movies in the summertime. And then it got to a point where we had watched so many movies. We're like, what have we watched at this point? Because we're probably well over 300 plus films by now. Who knows how many we've watched? So I was like, well, I'll just start a Facebook group for us and the guys, and we will post stuff up there to keep track of what we watched. Since then, that Facebook group has grown substantially. But one of the things that I've learned about watching all these movies is I've become, even though people know the kind of movies that me and you watch. I mean, I sent you the Wild World of Batwoman.
Oh, boy, did I love that one. I credit you immediately on that because what a film. Batwoman Seance, man. Holy shit. Wow.
That movie was all kinds of nutty. If you people haven't watched it yet, do go find it. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's only about an hour long.
It's great.
But since we've watched so many of these, and I've borrowed your term quite frequently, which is, I believe it's buried gems or something like that was what you said, or tarnished gems.
Yeah, something like lesser films. I think I called them lesser films or something like that, but whatever it is.
And I've gotten to a point now where we don't always watch bad movies, but I've gotten to a point now that since I've watched so many movies that I've become to not so much appreciate the movie, but I also take into account a filmmaker's style of movie when you're watching them. And I've noticed with Zack Snyder that it's like you said, Zack Snyder movies are pretty much almost always the same. And I'm beginning to wonder if his style and genre of filmmaking is kind of outdated now. Like when you go back and watch a Sedaris movie or any 80s action flick, like we watched one last night called Lady Terminator from 1998.
I love it. I own it. I have a copy of it in DVD.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
But it's even though it's made in Malaysia, it still tries to be a very 80s style film. And I don't know if it's maybe that Snyder is holding on to a filmmaking style. Like you couldn't make a 1980s action movie in modern day and expect it to go into movie theaters and things like that, because it's a different style of movie making now. Everything's different. But Zack Snyder still holds on to a lot of what he does, and he's not really evolving as a filmmaker, if that makes any sense to you. Like you can watch it. Of course, there's the stereotypical super slow motion action sequences and stuff, but you see that in 300. You see that in the Justice League. Like you can look at this movie and go, yeah, this is a Zack Snyder movie, but there's no real evolution in story and filmmaking and stuff where, like, when you have Denis, I can't pronounce his last name,
Dennis Villeneuve,
yeah, whatever, yeah, like his movies, each one of them, you can tell it's one of his movies, but each movie kind of does its own thing. Like The Arrival was different than Blade Runner 2049. Dune was different than those other two movies. But it's the same thing with Nolan. I guess the argument can be made with Nolan is that Nolan's movies kind of continuously, you can still tell it's a Christopher Nolan movie, but his movies, that's in my opinion a sign of a good filmmaker, is how they can do different movies and their moving process evolves, whereas Snyder's doesn't really seem to be evolving that much. It's kind of like, all right, I'm going to take this movie and Snyderize it, I don't know how else to put it. So I don't want to rag on the guy because I know he has his fans. And that's one of the things that I've tried to do over the years is, like, people go on Facebook and anytime anything Star Wars is made, you immediately have all of the people like, Star Wars sucks. It hasn't been good since the original 3 movies. And then, well, the prequels and everybody has their Star Wars. So I don't go on and bitch about Star Wars movies that like the last 3 movies, I couldn't stand them, but I don't spend my time going on and ragging on them because there's been a few good things since then as well. So I'm not one of those people that just goes out and like bashes movies on the internet. I've got better things to do. If I don't like it, I just won't watch it again. But if somebody somewhere likes the movie, okay, fine, that's cool. That's your, there's a microphone stand. If that's it, I'm talking animated right now.
That's fine.
But if somebody goes out and does like something, I'm not going to be like, okay, well, you're an idiot because you liked this movie. But personally, it's like, again, I didn't pay anything for the movie outside of my monthly subscription, so it was worth what I paid for. It's the same reason we watched the extended cut of Justice League. It was like, well, it's not costing us anything. Sure, let's watch this and see where this 6-hour ordeal goes. Because at any point, if it gets too bad, we can shut it off, which we said about Madam Web too. So
we did.
I mean, I'll watch it when it comes up, when it comes on. Sure, I'll watch it, and it's like, okay, it's a well done, not Star Wars movie. I'll put it that way, because there's a lot of Star Wars knockoff movies, but I just kind of look at it and go, okay, it's a Star Wars movie. It's a knockoff. It's better done than most of them that I watch. All right, it was fun, but like you said, I'm probably never going to watch it again. So, yeah, sure.
Well, I think as far as the not evolving thing, I really, just based on some of the stuff I've seen him say and kind of how other filmmakers of this type are, I think it is, you would say, he's got his fans. And I really think that's it. I think his fans are the reason he doesn't feel like he has to change anything, because there are people that really enjoy what he does. That's fine. Yeah. I'm not, in comparison to many other worse made films, you can do a lot worse. His movies, while they may not be narratively very satisfying or inventive a lot of times, they're usually pretty good looking. They're usually some type of visual inventiveness. He has his, kind of stock things that he does, but it's not flat shots. It's not boring. It's not a camera that doesn't move. There's a lot of movement and action. There's a lot of very stylized shots. He clearly has an eye for how to set up what you're looking at. And that's something that some filmmakers who pull in a lot more numbers than him fail at a lot. So I can't really be too critical of it, because there are far worse people with similar budgets making really bad, boring movies. And at the very least, there are some people who you can fail on one side or another of a fence for a lot of people. Some people will fail on, I don't care if it's boring, if the story's really good. And the other side is, I don't care if it's bad, if it's boring, as long as it looks good. If the story's boring, I don't care. I've
seen some really amazing movie with shitty special effects and went, this is still a pretty decent movie, even though the effects aren't that great. I mean, I've seen, like with Snyder's case, really great special effects, but the story's kind of like, I guess. But if he's got his fans, fine, whatever,
I probably have liked. I think I've said this before. I think my ratio on Zack Snyder is about 50%. Every other film I like, and every other film I never need to watch again. I don't think I've ever watched any that I thought were awful. I don't think I've seen a Zack Snyder film where I went, "Wow, that was bad."
Did you see No, that's right. Did you see the Snyder's cut of Justice League? Because I'll say Justice League, but Joss Whedon was the one that took over on that one.
Yeah, I thought the extended version, because I'd watched the Joss Whedon one, was fine. Now,
it just had a lot of filler in it. That was the only problem.
Well, it did, but the Joss Whedon one was, I thought, awful. I found that movie to be, I couldn't finish it. I literally didn't finish it. I gave up a half hour before the ending because I finally got to a point where I'm like, I am aggravated watching this movie, and I should not be aggravated watching a movie. And I just gave up, and I never saw the ending of the Whedon one because I think there was 30 minutes left, and I was like, nope, I will go urinate for 30 minutes instead of watching this or something. I will find something else to do that is a better use of my life that is limited on this marble. I did Justice League Extended until the flashback sequence or the future. I knew what that was, and I stopped there, and I went, you know what? That's a perfectly fine Justice League movie. I'm okay with it. It was a logical end for what Zack Snyder's movies were doing. I didn't watch Batman 5 Super. Actually, that's a good example. So Man of Steel was a good movie for people who hate Superman. If you don't like Superman, it's a great movie. If you like Superman, it is a baffling film because it's not Superman. I've said that before, but I watched the whole thing and I went, okay, obviously Zack Snyder really doesn't like Superman. And that's the movie that he's made. It's sort of weird that they called it and he used the character of Superman, but nonetheless, it is a watchable film with a very strange point of view on a Superman-like character, but it's not Superman. Then I got to Batman 5 Superman, and I watched it to the point where Batman started levitating, and I went, I'm good, and turned that off. And the only thing I ever watched of it again...
I can't fault you on that.
No, the only thing I ever watched of that again was I watched one or two of the nightmare sequences, which, again, were visually very interesting. I thought they were interesting ideas in a movie that was a blender of dog shit, by and large. And then I watched the Doomsday fight, which was hilarious. I don't know what else you would call it. He had a CG Meatball Man just throwing CG ragdolls around. And I went, wow, this is stunning.
CG Meatball Man. There's the episode title right there.
Yeah, you're right. I'm typing it out right now. CG Meatball Man. I mean, but was it anything else? Could you call Doomsday anything other than that? Because
no,
it wasn't Doomsday.
No.
I know who Doomsday is. I read all those comics. I was big into that when it happened. So, and then wasn't Justice League after that? That was the next Zack Snyder film, I think, was Justice League.
Yeah, well, see, Justice League I give a little bit of slack to because of everything, because of what happened in Zack Snyder's life. And, so it's like, okay, they did what they could with what they had. They went to Whedon and was like, listen, can you fix this? And he was probably like, sure, it's a paycheck. I'll do what I can. And that's kind of the same thing that happened with the Solo movie. So, which I didn't think the Solo movie was that bad, but...
You mean the Star Wars film?
Yeah.
Oh no, I like that. I like that movie better than any of the newer ones, by far. Yeah. It's not even a comparison.
I think that and Rogue One were probably my two of the newer ones. That one and Rogue One were probably.
Yeah.
I didn't think Solo was that bad, but
I'm never gonna watch Rogue One. I have no interest. I don't watch movies where everybody's dead at the end. I'm done with that shit. I don't. That's not my Star Wars. Thanks. I want them to be alive. I go in for adventure and happiness. Not everybody's dead. I'm okay.
I understand that, but it really is a decent movie. I know. Again, the Star Wars, like all this stuff, there's fandom on each side that will fight vehemently about.
Well, I'll
whatever
just say,
you say.
I do not even
But
a
I mean,
little
if you
bit
don't want to see
doubt,
it, yeah, fine, I get it. You know,
I don't doubt for a minute that it's a well-made film that is probably, from a filmmaking standpoint, I will absolutely grant you that I am sure, without ever having seen it, I would bet money that it is a better made film than any of the new movies in the main trilogy. Any of them. Awakens.
yeah, because they pretty much left it alone. They said, "All right, everybody dies. Go do what you want to do," and they,
Yes.
you know, they kind of kept their fingers out of it and just let the person make the movie. So
I understand that. I'm sure. I'm sure it was well made. I'm sure that it was cohesively a better film. I just don't have an interest in a movie where everybody is nuked at the end. That's just me, but that's not a commentary on the film. So then I did look. Justice League was the next one. So yes, like you said, he didn't actually get to make it until he got to do his cut. I thought that cut was a good ending to what his version of DC was. Did I think it was a fantastic movie I'll watch again? No, but I thought it was better than Whedon's version, and I thought that it was a functional end, and it made sense with this version of these characters, none of whom I really cared for, but understanding that this was Snyder's vision of them, it worked. It made sense. I thought that there was a lot of filler, but there was also a lot more characterization, particularly for Cyborg, which was missing. And the Whedon cut felt very janky and jumpy, whereas this one maybe was too long, but I'll take too long if it fills in narrative steps that get you from one thing to another logically, as opposed to, oh, we'll make it 90 minutes and you're going to be leaping past scenes and not understanding why things are happening. So, and then
I'll
I saw
agree
Army.
with that.
Yeah. And I think that was my review. I was like, it's far better than the Whedon cut. It's not going to turn you around on Snyder's version of the characters.
No, but it did tell a more cohesive, better story. The only thing, because I think that came out when COVID was in the midst and everybody was stuck at home
2021.
anyways.
Yep.
So HBO probably said, all right, we'll let you do this, but make it bigger so we can get more people to watch and have more episodes and stuff like that.
No, that was the big thing for Max. That was their sales point for Max. Was you've been demanding it for years and years and years, which was really just Snyder's fans, but sure, everybody. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to release it on Max, only on Max. And I think it worked. I think that did give them a massive spike for a while. And then he did Army of the Dead, which was for Netflix, I believe. I watched that and I thought it was okay. You know, it was not not reinventing zombies, just a kind of action-y zombie film that had some narrative strangeness in terms of things that didn't make a whole lot of sense. But there again, that's Zack Snyder. You know, his best films are, in my opinion, movies based on somebody else's work, which is 300 and Watchmen. Those are his best movies.
Yeah, I can't say I can argue with you because those are probably the only two that I really give a care about, to be honest with you. Everything else he's done is kind of like, whatever.
And those two movies,
take it or leave it.
He wasn't going to be allowed to change them very much. See, that's the thing is with these other ones, I think he had more control to change things and mold things into how he saw them. Whereas Watchmen, many people are like he was faithful to a fault. I don't agree with that, but sure, I can see the argument, I guess. And 300, well, that's the comic as I remember it. I didn't think it was a groundbreaking comic. It just was very interesting visually, and so was the movie. It's a pretty straightforward story. So you almost can't fuck it up, which is good for him, because all he has to do then is make it pretty and sexy, which is what he did. Bunch of muscled oiled dudes wailing on each other. Go. Done. Slow-mo, speed up. Slow-mo, speed up. Slow-mo, speed up. Gerard Butler yells. Done. Movies works.
I have a feeling that just might be his thing from now on. You know, which if that's what it is, then whatever. I get this idea that he just might be making I guess straight to streaming is kind of like the new straight to video, but it's a little bit upper scale, I guess you'd want to call it that. Because cinema since Disney bought Marvel and Star Wars, for the longest time, if you weren't one of those movies, you couldn't get a movie in the movie theater that anybody would pay attention to. Right. So that's why I'm kind of glad that this whole Disney thing has happened the way that it is, and people are like, all right, these movies suck. You need to stop doing this and start making decent quality stuff again. And Marvel's been like, all right, we're going to pull back. We're going to change everything because we're losing our ass. And then when they're in the process, you're seeing a lot more movies starting to pop up in movie theaters where people are paying more attention to them now. Because before, if you weren't making a superhero movie, or you weren't trying to keep up with the Joneses, no one was going to pay attention to your movie at the movie theater. Like I think, what was it, Asteroid City, when that came out, that one got a little bit of traction. Weird movie, by the way. But up until then, I think The Menu was another movie that came out that actually got a little bit of traction that people paid attention to. Barbie was a big
Barbenheimer
blockbuster.
was the big one. That was where the
Oppenheimer and Barbie.
Yeah.
But I tend to wonder if Marvel had movies coming out, or if there was a Star Wars movie or something coming out, if those movies even would have been paid attention to. Now with the media, with Marvel, with Disney pulling back and being like, all right, we need to refocus here, it's put a lot less movies in the movie theaters that aren't those kind of movies. Like me and a buddy of mine were talking about this. One of the Cinema La Bad guys, we had went out and saw Dune 2. And Dune 2, of course, turned out to be this massive, huge success, which, great. Me and you are fans of Dune, and we're both fans of that director. But I said, this is going to be one of those movies that's going to change everything, because every time a substantial movie comes along that generates that much hype and is very different in its filmmaking style. Like you saw this happen with The Matrix. When The Matrix came out, everybody was like, okay, we got to make movies with bullet time, or we got to do this, or we got to do that. Star Wars was one of those movies that changed how movies were made. So now that Dune came out and it was super popular, I can just see the people in the movie studios, the executives sitting in their boardroom smoking their cigars, salivating, going, okay, we need to capitalize. Like Harry Potter. When Harry Potter broke big, everybody was like, go out and buy all of these books from young adult authors. And then you saw Twilight, and you saw Percy Jackson, and you saw any young adult author that was out there had their books bought and turned into movies, and a lot of them were shit. Oh god, what was the dragon one? I can't remember what the hell it was called. The guy that wrote it at the time was like 16 years old or something like that.
Not How to Train Your Dragon.
No. It was when it came out, it was way different than the book. It was incredibly watered down. Lando talked about it. Is it Aragon or something like that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's Aragon. Yeah, I think it is. I'm pretty sure it is. Aragon with like an E.
And it wasn't a bad book, but when the movie came out, it was like, this is incredibly fucking generic. There's nothing
Aragon.
in this movie. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
And it was a cool book. And then when the movie comes out, it's like, all right, there's no dwarves. These are just regular people. It was incredibly homogenized. So,
well, in fairness, that's always been movie making. I mean, that's, there is always the copy the trend thing. So you're right. There's going to be some attempt to make another, I don't know, grand political science fiction opera, I guess. Yeah. I don't know what else to call it, really.
So I'm wondering what's going to happen with Dune, with movies like Dune, or how the industry is going to try to copy it, because nobody wants to take a risk anymore. It's too much money.
Well, that's what I think will stop it is the expense. I think it's ultimately that a lot of these places are not going to want to spend. So you may see some, I guess, broke-ass versions of them. Maybe you might see somebody try to make a cheaper version. I don't even know what that would look like, but I think that might be the thing that stops the copycatting that we used to see, is simply that there's not going to be as much money put into these films. And what will end up probably happening, if I had to guess, is that the only movies that will be made are going to be made by people who just take whatever paycheck they can, but aren't really making the best version of the movie, and that will very quickly bomb and it'll be over with. So kind of the same thing that's always happened, more or less, is only the people who don't have the artistic integrity to say, no, this is what this is going to cost to make this movie. I can't make this movie for $50. You're not going to make a Dune analog for,
no, but somebody will. So there's going to be a Sedaris-like person who's going to come along and say, you know what? Sure, I'll make you a sci-fi movie within this budget,
And the only way it would work is if it is some kind of like junky, midnight movie style thing where, but the odds of that are so low. So no, it'll be the same copycat cycle where much of it'll be, as you said, junk. Mm-hmm. And then it'll fade off, and then Dune Part 3 will come out, and there'll be another small surge of interest in doing this thing again, and it'll,
I'm wondering how Dune 3 is going to work, because Messiah, of those 3 books, Messiah was kind of the most boring one. I don't think there's any big epic battles in it. I think the craziest thing that happens is his sister goes berserk, and, You know,
it's not like I didn't think Dune Part 1 was boring as hell. So I have not watched that since I watched it the first time, and I don't remember much of it.
You didn't like the first. You didn't like Part 1 of it, huh?
It is an extraordinarily good adaptation of part of the first Dune book. No doubt about it. In comparison to almost every other version of Dune I've seen, and I've seen, as far as I know, all of them that were ever released, it is
Even
the
Sci-Fi Channel one?
Yeah, I've seen all those, and don't get me wrong, those were far better in terms of taking the material and putting it into the series. No
we
doubt
tried to
about
go
it.
back and rewatch Children of Dune, and it just does not hold up anymore. You watch the special effects and stuff in it are like,
and
did they use an Unreal Engine to do this?
Yeah, no, it's that's the problem, is that Sci-Fi Channel did not have the resources to do what they were saying they were going to do. They could not actually make that work the way it should have been done. But as far as adapting the material, they put a lot more into it than certainly any of the ones that really had been attempted.
Well, yeah,
before.
they're a miniseries, that's why. But I think I think in the Sci-Fi when they took Dune Messiah and Children of Dune and combined them together.
Yes, they tried to meld them, which can work. You can do those things. I on the last show I talked about Three Body Problem, which, as far as I understand, adapts part 1.5. So it's the first and some of the second book in that first 8 episodes. Mm-hmm. And from what I've read of what the plot is, it makes sense. It works. You can, they changed some things. There were characters who were alive in the book that died in this, or in the series. Sorry about the spoiler, I guess, but I'm trying to be vague. Mm-hmm. And maybe purists would be upset about that, but I didn't sense anything weird about it narratively. So you can meld and remix and amalgamate characters because, Dune's a big book with a big bunch of people in it.
It's
a
lot
of people.
Yeah, I've had this conversation before. It's like, that's a really hard book to make into a movie because there's so much going on. We had this conversation on this other podcast that I host, and my co-host was like, well, they took this out, they took that out, they took this out, how they changed the ending where Aaliyah doesn't, she isn't the one that actually does the deed on the Baron Harkonnen. And I'm like, well, I understand where you're coming from, but these movies are so vast, like they're so crunched on time and budget with how they had to make this movie. I'm like, it's not a matter of things were sacrificed. It comes down to, well, what was sacrificed and how much did it really change the detriment of the story? Whereas like her not killing the Baron Harkonnen, does it really change the story that much? It probably will a little bit when Messiah comes, but I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. They can work around it. The way the last Dune movies is they changed the order that the story was told. Same story, but the order that it was told in was what was rearranged and differently in the movie. Like where he sticks his hand in the box and a bunch of other different things. They all happened differently. Now, I did have some problems with Dune 2, like the fact that, like, here's this cave and here's all the atomic weapons and nobody knows about that. We brought these here. And it's like, oh, all right, sure, whatever. Okay, So...
Well, I think your original statement about it's trying to make it, the problem is Dune is not suited for movies.
No.
Now, that doesn't mean you can't adapt it to live action, but it has to be a miniseries, and it probably has to be multiple miniseries to really
do it properly.
This is what's funny to me about people, because as everyone knows, I am a stalwart lover of Lynch's Dune, and I still think it's the best Dune I've ever seen, and I say that still today, having seen Dune Part 1. And I'm sure I'm going to say it after Dune Part 2. And I don't pretend it's a good adaptation of the book. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's the best version of Dune I've ever seen because of its artistic vision. But what I heard a lot of people say for years prior to these new movies coming out was, well, you can't possibly call it it's not really Dune because it changed and cut so much out of the books. And if you're not going to do that, then, why call it Dune? And I went, okay, I'm a fan of the first 2 books. I don't get into the rest of them. I read What was the third one? Was that God Emperor of Dune? Or maybe it's
Yeah, that was, well, there was Dune, Children of Dune. No, there was Dune Messiah, and then Children of Dune.
Okay, so Children of Dune.
And then Emperor of Dune was the fourth one, which was a really bizarre book.
Yeah, so I read Children of Dune, and I barely remember it, and I just remember thinking, okay, this is a massive step down from the first two, which I think are really just, they're one book. Dune and Dune Messiah are one book to me. They should be printed as one book. Yeah, they should be
one book, yeah.
Right. Great story. Really, really great story about the danger of being a zealot and how power, like all the stuff that everybody else has written. I'm not going to come up with anything new in this. It's great. It's very dense. I understand that it's challenging and that some people can't make it through it. I completely sympathize. That's why I'm never going to read the Lord of the Rings books, because fuck you. I don't need 4-hour descriptions of a leaf falling from a tree. I cite that example every time because that's the thing that bugged the fuck out of me, is I don't need this much goddamn detail on little stuff in a book that's this huge. I mean, Jesus, give it a rest, Tolkien. So I understand why people can't make it through it, but the argument was, well, you can't cut these things out. You can't change things from Dune. If you're going to adapt Dune, you have to adapt it, because it only works if it's adapting the book properly. And I went, okay, that's, it did. It completely perverted the ending of Dune. Lynch's Dune's ending is a complete reversal of what Herbert wrote as Dune. Instead of the Messiah being the terrible thing, he's like the savior of the planet where it rains, which would kill all the worms. So it makes no sense in terms of what the books are. So I went, okay, I understand that criticism. And if you're a purist and you really love the books that much, I can understand why you just can't get behind Lynch's thing. Even if you get past all the weirdness and the warts on the Baron and all that stuff and him screaming and floating around, which I think is adorable, but other people get all hot and bothered about. That's fine. But then you come along to Dune Part 1 and 2, and I'm reading all these things that were excised or changed or rearranged, and yet people are like, this is it, the vision. They finally adapted. I'm like, wait a minute. Either you can't cut and rearrange things or you can. So, again, I'm not saying that to say that this is where I think they suck. I don't think they suck. It was a beautifully crafted film. The first one was meticulous. It was also sterile and devoid of any artistic soul, which is where Lynch's is the opposite to me. Yeah, I just felt like an Apple version of Dune. It was very clean and clinical and emotionless in a weird way. It was gorgeous, and everybody in it was good. I can't complain about any particular element of the filmmaking. It is a magnificently crafted film from a technical perspective, but I had no reaction to it. I just watched it and I felt nothing. And when I got to the end, I went, huh, okay. Well, that was largely the book, and And then I forgot about it. And I honestly could not remember right now more than a handful of scenes from it. Whereas Lynch's movie, I rewatch every year. And even people that I know that don't really understand the story, they remember what they felt watching it. And that's the difference. And it's hard to explain that difference. And again, that's not for me trying to convince anybody that they shouldn't like one and they should like the other. But for me, what Lynch did with Dune wasn't really adapting Dune, but he was taking concepts and he was injecting them with his particular view of the world, which is fucking warped. And I'm fucking warped. So I was going to
say those movies were made for different kinds
Weirdos.
Of people.
Yes.
Yeah. So
and that's what I am.
With these movies, I think they were trying. That's one of the things I brought up with my buddy. I was like, I think they're trying to make this more accessible to as many people as possible, because it costs so much to make it. They want to make as much money as they can off of these movies. And if they get too trippy, because I remember going to the movie theater when I was a little kid and seeing Dune at the theater and them handing me a pamphlet on the way in.
Yes.
And I'm looking at it like, this is a damn encyclopedia. Do I have to read this to be able to enjoy? Because I hadn't read the books yet. And I'm like, do I have to read this to be able to enjoy this movie? And that was a little off-putting.
Well, I'll say this. I will say this about I'll say this about Lynch's Dune first, and then I'll talk about the DV Dune. Lynch's Dune, the mistake there, I think, was and I understand that this is the nature of movie making. So this is the problem with Lynch in general. He is not mass market movie making guy. He is not going to make a film that is going to be a blockbuster. The Elephant Man was an aberration. It was an aberration because it just happened to be a weird subject matter that he was interested in that people generally responded to. That's why that movie worked. Every other one of his has been met with respect from weirdo art people and confusion from almost everybody else. But generally, even people who don't get it, because like my wife and I are rewatching Twin Peaks right now, and and season 3 I think really pushed her to the edge because it's so out there. But even there, most people still can see the artistic vision. They understand that this person is doing something unique. And I think that's where I would never have explained anything. Let people be confused. It doesn't all have to be explained to you. Let them just react to what they're seeing, even if they're confused by it. It's going to turn off 75% of them, but you will make diehard lifelong fans out of the other 25%. But that's not a formula for movie making success. Now, on the other side, the villain DV's Dune, I will say without any hesitation, is the best adaptation of Dune I've ever seen in terms of taking the book and its dense, rich material and making it into something that people can understand, enjoy, and be entertained by. No question. There is no comparison from Lynch's Dune, which I've owned like 80 copies of at this point and will buy every copy they ever make. Understand, I am like a lifelong devotee, whatever, how you're supposed to pronounce it. I adore that film. It's in my top 10 easily of all time. Right up there with Stalker, which for some people will make their eyes roll back into their head, but that's the truth.
We're going to watch that this summer out in the backyard. We've already got it saved.
What, Lynch or Stalker?
The Stalker. Stalkers.
Oh.
We're like,
Have
we're
you ever
gonna...
seen it?
No.
Oh my God, you're in for such a great time.
And there's another movie that I'll find it. Go ahead while you're talking. I'll find it.
Yeah, but so understanding that, I will still, without any hesitation, say that DV's Dune is the one that will get most people to experience Dune who have never read the book, understand it, and perhaps love it. And in that sense, I'm very happy it's there. Plus, I like him as a filmmaker, so I didn't want it to fail. I think a lot of people, when there's some alternative version of something that they really like, they want it to secretly fail. I don't want that. I'm thrilled that it's blowing up and everybody loves it. And I'm actually kind of hoping
that's the way I am.
Yeah, it's great. It should be for everybody. There should be weird versions of things for the weirdos, and there should be the other stuff for people who don't have the time or energy to put into that. I don't find any fault in people who can't experience weird art. I try to make them if I can.
Mountain. That's the other mountain. That's the other.
Oh yeah, that's Jodorowsky, who almost made Dune, and I would have loved to see what his Dune would have been. I'm guessing would have been a lot of nudity and body fluids, which Lynch's kind of was, but without all the full frontal nudity. That's probably what you would have gotten out of Jodorowsky. You probably would have seen Sting swinging his dick the whole movie, which is almost what you got with Lynch, but not quite.
Yeah, there's been a few times where we've come close to watching Holy Mountain, and we're like, you know what? Let's save this for we're in the backyard in the summertime with the fire pit going and the movie projector on the screen in the backyard, so we can just sit down and actually digest it. Because right now we're watching movies together through Discord for the most part.
Sure. And
it's like, this looks like a movie that needs to be savored in its own way.
Yeah, Holy Mountain and El Topo are really interesting films. I don't know that I've watched Holy Mountain twice. I've watched El Topo once.
Never even heard of El Topo. I'm going to look that one up.
Oh, yeah. Look that one up. Look that one up. That is generally seen as the other masterpiece by, I think it's supposed to be actually Jodorowsky. I think I'm mispronouncing it. Usually it's Holy Mountain and El Topo get held up as the two great examples of his
Mexican acid Western film.
That's it. Yep. That's it. And
this sounds right up our alley.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. It's great. But I don't think I'll ever need to watch them again. Yet they're largely burned into my mind because I don't know anything else like them. They're not really enjoyable to me, but they are a wonderful representation of somebody's view of a part of his world. And I have such respect for that, to be able to just make that and not care whether anybody thinks that they can get into it or not. I don't think every single movie everybody watches should be completely indecipherable and make you have to really think hard, but I think there's a place for that. And when somebody does it well, I have a lot of respect for it, and I will try to get other people to experience it, if not love it. And that's kind of how I look at something like Lynch's Dune. It's not going to be for everybody, but the one thing I don't like about the popular opinion of that movie, that it's so bad, is that it will stop people from ever watching it. And I always think that's a negative. There's very few movies that I actively tell people, don't watch this. And that's only if I feel like they're insulting. They're insulting to people's intelligence. There's very few of those movies.
So you would tell people, do not watch Madam Web, is where you're going with it.
No, actually, I would tell certain
Do you just want to go right into Madam Web? Sure.
Sure. No, we can jump into that, because I actually would not call it a bad movie. I would call it a study in bafflingly weird decision making, because it's too, and this is going to sound weird once we start talking about it, it's too well made for me to call it a bad movie. It doesn't look crappy enough.
I can't disagree with you, because when we sat down to watch it, we're like, you know what? Let's just watch this as though we're watching a B movie.
Yes.
Or a badly made B movie. And that was the only way I could get my buddy to watch it. And then I had watched half of it, and then we went back and rewatched the entire thing with my buddy, and we ended up watching it in two halves. There was no way we could make it through in one night. We're like, we just can't finish this tonight. Well, and I'm like, no, we're not going to let this movie defeat us. Of all the movies we've watched, of all the bad movies we watched, I'm like, I'm not going to let this movie defeat us. So we went back and finished it the next night. But you're right. We couldn't even enjoy it as a bad movie. We just couldn't do it.
No, it's fascinating, because let's start off, just so we set the scene, because there are people, I actually was talking to somebody who'd never even heard of this movie, which is kind of funny to me, because I thought it had such a reputation that everybody's at least heard of it. But let's start off with the character of Madam Web. Now, do you know that character at all?
Oh God, I vaguely remember reading the comic books, and I was like, this doesn't really have anything of any real significance to add to the whole Spider-Man world. And then when they said, we're going to make Madam Web as a movie, it's kind of like, okay, maybe they're going to do something different with it. But
for anyone who doesn't know the character, and even if you're into Spider-Man comics, you might not, because this is not a central Spider-Man character. Now, it's a
horribly obscure character.
Yeah, it's from the 70s, which makes sense, because a lot of acid or drugs will create a character like this as something you put in a comic book. The character, as traditionally depicted, is an elderly woman who is blind, paralyzed, so she cannot move, and her power is she's essentially a super precog. She can see the future, present, and past of anyone who possesses spider powers. Now, right there's so many problems with the way that the Spider-Man powers are defined with this character. Even in the comics, it doesn't make any sense.
There were no spider powers. All she could do was really see the future. That's it. She couldn't climb walls. She couldn't shoot webs. She didn't have super strength.
They later started adding the fact, when there became more spider people, when there was Spider-Woman and Silk and all these other characters who had spider powers, that it became this kind of almost force idea of the spider powers. So they've changed it. But even in the modern incarnation, where all that is true, where there is this web that she can control and weave, and, she's like the architect of spider people. Even in that, who says, let's make this the lead of a film? It's incomprehensibly weird. Not even
and the
stupid,
other thing,
weird.
It had zero direct references to Spider-Man other than Ben Parker. And the thing that, the one thing that I started cackling, I didn't know how else to respond to it, was the phrase, when you achieve great power, responsibility will come.
I have that clip. We will hear it. We will all hear it.
I stole your thunder.
No, you are right, because it is so obvious that they are trying to say, with great power comes great responsibility. But of course, that's a trademarked, I believe, phrase that would cause Marvel to say, no. You're allowed to use everything but these things, not that. Mm-hmm. So, but that's the setup of the character. It is the farthest or furthest, depending on which you're supposed to use in this context. I don't know. I'm not the best at the English stuff. Whatever, it is not in the top 100 of characters that you would pick from any comic to say, let's make this the lead of the film. Any of the other spider people would almost be a better decision. Any of the female characters that she mentors, if you want to use that term, which is extraordinarily generous,
Yeah.
would have been a better one. And then she could have been revealed as guiding that character to her ultimate destiny. That would have made more sense. And then I'm doing these people's work for them. Then you set up a series of films with her as the central character that then brings them together in the final film. That
Yes,
she says,
that
yes,
makes
I have
way
been,
too much sense.
right. In the background, I have been guiding all of you. I didn't want to manipulate you. So what I did was I made sure that you saw the path to your destiny and you took it. And now that you're all together, I will help you beat this ultimate foe who is far more powerful than you, but you have the advantage of there's more than one of you, and I will be looking over your shoulder to guide you to this. It is a beautiful setup for a film. Like, you can do all this and assemble these characters. Instead, this movie took the character of Madame Web, or Madame Web. I keep saying Madame because it's got the E on it, and I was like, oh, Madame. And makes it the central character. So we start off, and right away, there's an immediate problem, which you might not necessarily hear, but I will point out to you. You get a flashback scene in the 70s, I think it was. I think it said 70, 73, whatever it was. And we're in the jungle somewhere, and we have a man and a woman who are searching for a spider, which is very evident because we keep seeing spider webs. I'm sorry, the Peruvian Amazon. I don't think it actually specifies a year. I just see Peruvian Amazon.
Peruvian Amazon.
Here it is, 1973. I was correct. I remembered that. Oh, God. I remembered something from this film. And these two are there, and we get an explanation from the female character who is very pregnant to her male companion who immediately looks like he is suspicious, and we'll find out is, about what she's searching for and why these spiders are so important. So let's listen to this wonderful bit of exposition on what this jungle expedition's aim is.
Do you think we're close?
They're almost impossible to find. No one's ever captured one alive.
I agreed to provide security for you because I thought you were close to finding the spider.
Well, it'll be worth the wait. Dead specimens show that the peptides in the spider's venom, they supercharge their cellular structure.
That spider can give superhuman strength and power like Las Arañas.
Las Arañas, the mythical spider people who run across the treetops and punish evil men with their black poison touch. I like to base my research in science, not legends, Mr. Sims.
Those powers are wasted here.
These little spiders have the potential to cure hundreds of diseases.
Are you okay?
No. She's trying her best to keep me from working. But I'm not gonna let her do that. Not when I'm this close.
All right, let's break down all the problems right here in that about minute and 6 seconds. That guy's voice is dubbed throughout the whole movie. And even in that clip, if you go back and re-listen to it, and feel free to if you really want to, hear what I'm talking about, now you're going to know what to pay attention for. Even in that scene, his energy level is all over the place. He sounds closer and further from the mic, even though it's the same scene. And there are multiple points in the film where his mouth doesn't match the words. And not just a little bit, because that happens in dubbing. You'll see it, even with the best dubbing, you'll sometimes see a little bit of a slip when they have to overdub because there was background noise or whatever. So I don't know if this actor's accent was too thick, if the performance was bad. I didn't see anything referencing why he's overdubbed like this. But it is one of the worst in a film of this scale. This is not some 60s Italian film made for $30 down in the Philippines.
No,
this is
it's
a
Sony.
multi-million-dollar Sony Spider-Person project with Marvel's name tagged on it, even if just an association. It's there. And this is horrible dubbing. And then we get, the explanation of the super spider people, which is probably the worst effect of the film, is when they're jumping around. That is really bad when they show that.
Oh,
CG.
the people that were up in the trees, the Peruvian spider tribe.
Los Araños, yes.
Yeah.
And so, you immediately get the setup of, okay, he jumps to, it gives them superpowers. No context for that, no setup. Okay, it's mythology, but he's saying it as if it's fact. These spiders will give people superpowers, not, these spiders in the myths, they say they can grant superpowers. He's like, no. These spiders, superpowers, baby. Baked right in. Let's get one. And so, of course, what ends up happening is they basically pull a Batman where or I guess, Uncle Ben, whatever, where she finds the CG spider, which doesn't look that bad, to be honest. It looks fine as a little CG spider. It looks believable enough, except it's very, very brightly colored because, of course, it's a super spider. And this guy wastes everybody in the camp, shoots her, and then the spider people show up. Now, the thing I love best about the spider people is they look like they should be out of a sequel to The Descent. They look like somebody just exploded a pregnant woman all over them. They're covered in red. I don't know what it is. Mud? They look like
vine. It looked like it looked like a tribe of natives tried to make a Spider-Man costume.
Well, yes,
they were supposed to look like They were supposed to look like Spider-Man, which is another
they have
Spider person. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's these wrappings. Yeah, that's the other thing. But they're actually covered in some kind of, I don't know what it is,
mud
but
it
looks like they tunneled out from a whale's asshole. It looks like they violently came out of the back end of a creature, and the blood dried up. Yeah, no. They're actual people, at least as far as we can tell. I'm pretty sure these are actual people, but they look terrifying.
And yet they speak English in Peru.
Well,
in the jungle.
Yes, there is that. Maybe one of their powers is that they make you understand them in the language you're familiar with. We don't know. Every universe has its own rules. And so
Italian Spider-Man could summon penguins, so,
That would have been a better spider power than most of what we see in this film, that's for sure. So they have the spider bite the mother to try to save her, which even though they don't explain that till later, it's pretty obvious that's what they're doing. And then they extract the baby from her. And I don't know how she then gets back to America. They just jump straight to the modern day.
Yeah. And he says, we will be here for you when you have questions that need answers.
Yes.
And then they flash to modern day where she's driving an ambulance. And it's like, how did they get this small baby child, this tribe of people in Peru, get this child back to America? I don't, okay, sure, whatever. Okay, we'll let that one slide, but okay, whatever.
Also, at no point are we ever shown, because they say, we'll be here for you. Of course, she's just born. She's not going to remember that. There's no way. And we never see her discover a note that says, come find us. We know who your mother was. We will help you. We are the spider people. There's nothing like that.
She just finds a book with a bunch of drawings of trees.
Yes.
And then somehow she uses that to get back to Peru.
Right.
To meet the now no longer spider tribe guy, but the guy all dressed up in like a suit, like the most interesting man in the world.
I said they took Desperado and smushed him together with the most interesting man in the world. That was exactly my description.
Yeah.
This was the Antonio Banderazation of the spider people. That's
and she's walking through the woods and she looks at a drawing. It's not even a picture. It's a drawing, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
These two trees growing out. And she's like, oh, this must be where I'm at. And I'm thinking, the rainforest grows at 1,000,000 miles an hour. If you go down there now and you go back in 5 years, it's not going to look the same, or 10 years or 20 years. All that stuff is going to be gone or grown over or moved. Okay, sure, whatever. Let's keep going.
Right. But we're not there yet. Let's jump back
go ahead.
to what you just
go
said.
Ahead. I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry.
No. Much like this film, there is no coherence to be had. So go wherever you want, because this movie clearly wasn't concerned with being a cohesive thing. Why should we? So we jump to 2003. Now, I want to make a comment about 2003. If this movie had been released in 2003, I would be much kinder to it, because in 2003, we didn't really have the well-established formula for superhero films. They were certainly on the rise post X-Men. That was really when they started picking up steam, but we were not quite at the Marvel formula that we know works, even if we're getting tired of it now. It did work for a long time. So if this movie had been made then, I would say, okay, they weren't sure how to make this. Marvel wasn't going to let them make a Spider-Man film because they weren't confident it would work. They didn't know if the formula was going to work, so they wanted to test this out. This movie would be much more passable in 2003.
And they would have been able to get away with saying things like, with great power comes great responsibility. And they could have made a lot more references, because Disney wouldn't have been involved to say, no, don't take that, don't put that in there, take that out of there, or whatever. They wouldn't have had to have dealt with the divorced child, for lack of a better term.
Well, I would even argue that this movie probably would have done better. It probably would have been received better. It probably would have been more popular. It probably would have been remembered better like a lot of movies that now you go back and watch the original X-Men, it's got some creakiness. You know, and I remember that being the greatest movie I'd ever seen when it came out in 2000. I was like, holy shit, this is it, man. They cracked the code. Well, no, they didn't, but we didn't have
like Michael Keaton's Batman and all the Batman movies and stuff. Yeah, it was a different time of superhero movie making. There wasn't really a formula or anything like that. It probably would have done a whole lot better.
Correct.
But they probably would have treated it a lot better too. But
yes, probably.
See, that's one of the things I was going to talk to you about, though. Well, you know what? Let's finish talking about Madam Web first, because I've got this quirky idea about Sony and Marvel and things like that. But go ahead.
Yes,
because there's far more to this movie.
Oh, far more. So yes, we smash into 2003, where we have Dakota Johnson, I believe is the actress's name, who is playing one of the most unlikable main characters I think I've seen in a movie in a while for who is supposed to be a heroic lead. She is driving an ambulance like a lunatic through New York City, which, don't get me wrong, people do drive like maniacs.
That reminds
in New York
me of
City.
something I got to bring up when you get to it, but go ahead.
Okay. So she's driving along, and what this really is a setup to have her randomly encounter 3 young women who are going to then be the actual, in theory, heroes of the movie later. And she is in the ambulance with Adam Scott, who is playing Ben Parker. Adam Scott, who is in a completely different movie than everybody else, because he's great. He's playing his role very well. He's responding logically. He's acting. He seems to actually be interested in delivering the lines as they should be delivered with a character that we like and have sympathy for and is funny and seems somewhat realistic. And he is paired with a woman who seems to actively hate children. Actively hate children. Not just isn't really comfortable with them or, kids just aren't my thing. Seems to fucking hate children because once they get to the hospital, after she encounters all these random women, including that Sydney Sweeney actress who everybody seems to think is really good. Holy shit. If she was not the worst person in this movie, and I don't fault her, I from what I've read, this movie was horrific to make. So I think she probably had lost all will to live in the production of this. And that would explain her character's
face. And you can see that in the actors. All of the actors were that way. All of them were like, they were just like, are we done filming this movie yet? Even in the press press tours and stuff that they did.
Yes. The young black girl seemed to be having a good time. She seemed to be having fun. Like she seemed to be at least making the most of what otherwise might have been a terrible film. Like she and Adam Scott.
But none of them are likable. None of them are. No, it's like a movie. It's like when you're watching a B movie and like a slasher film, and you hate the characters so much you want all of them to die.
Yes, well, definitely.
Like none of these characters in this movie, other than Ben Parker, nobody else in the movie was like. None of these people are. They're all whiny little bitches and brats. Correct. And. Yep. Or they weren't, none of them were likable. None of them.
And specifically to illustrate what we're talking about, because most of you won't watch this movie, and rightfully so, when they get to the hospital, so again, this character is an EMT who seems to hate people, specifically children, but it's not like she seems to even want to be around her coworkers. Adam Scott's character has to force her, basically trick her into going to a baby shower. But while they're at the hospital, a young child comes up to thank her for saving, I guess, his mom or his dad, whatever, and hands her a little picture, and she literally just stares at him and says to Adam Scott, what am I supposed to do with this? And he says, just take it. Just take it and say thank you, and you can throw it away later. And the way he says it, I should have captured it, is what you would say to an alien wearing a skin suit of a person who doesn't know how to interact with other people. That's what makes sense in this scenario. So that's your first introduction to this character. And then they expand on that by her going to the actual baby shower. And I did pull the audio from this because it is nearly unbelievable that this is the dialogue provided to a character who is going to be.
I've got a bone to pick about that too, but you go ahead and play your audio.
Well, let's play it because there's a couple of wonderful pieces of dialogue in here from this character. Remember, this was scripted for the lead of your superhero film to say as a way of her interfacing with other human beings. Enjoy, everybody.
Cassie Webb, thanks for having me. You're Ben's partner. I'm his sister-in-law, Mary. Nice to meet you. Ben is so excited about being an uncle.
I don't know what we'd do without him, especially with Richard away.
Again. Where is it this time?
He's in Mumbai, Shanghai. I can't keep track. Never stops leaping around in there. And always hungry.
Does it have a name?
We're saving that for one of the games.
Games.
Okay. My mother always cut the crusts off my sandwiches. Chloe, is that you?
Yes.
My mom said the crusts would make my hair go curly. It was years before I figured that one out. Okay. Whose is this?
Oh, it's mine.
You must have at least one fond memory of your mother.
Well, my mother actually died in childbirth. Well, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't like, I mean, obviously it was bad. You know, she died. But I grew up totally healthy. Death in childbirth is super rare. I mean, she chose to be like way deep in the Amazon for the last month of her pregnancy, hundreds of miles away from any medical facilities. So
Okay, so let's move on to the next game.
Astonishing. Astonishing.
Yeah.
Does it
Yeah.
have a name? And
Yeah.
then, okay, you could just say, well, number one, don't put a blank piece of paper. Just don't play. They don't care about you, Cassie. They would have forgotten you were even there because you're such a fucking wet, damp towel of nothing. Goddamn hates
Don't mince
everybody
words.
around
How do you
you.
really feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it is, again, astonishing that this is your lead. This would be the villain in most films is, oh, this is the signal that there's something wrong with this person and they don't want to be in a room full of other people. Instead, the villain, outside of the terrible dubbing, is 8,000 times more charismatic than Cassie Webb ever is in the film. But all you would have to say is if you don't want to play the game, don't put a blank piece of paper. If they happen to notice and say, oh, Cassie, did you not put a piece of paper? You could say, well, my mother died when I was very, very young, and honestly, I just don't have that many memories. So I just didn't feel like I could really play. And you can just pass over it. Basic
Yep.
reading the room, anything. But instead, we get this horrible died in childbirth. Oh, it's rare. I'm sure you, I mean, and they, I will give the writers credit. They
And
have
they just
everybody
draw it
react
out
correctly.
too. And like,
Yes.
it's like, all right, you've
Strangely.
gone past the point of uncomfortableness. Now it's just becoming weird. And the other thing is, if you notice in that scene, and I could be wrong about this, I may have repressed the memory, but I don't think they ever actually said the name Peter.
No.
Every time they went to say the name Peter, like a horn would go off or something.
Yes.
It's like, why did you even bother putting that? There was no sense. There was no
Well,
need to put it in the movie the way that they did.
That's supposed to be an Easter egg for people in the know to say to the person next to them who has no clue what the fuck is going on. Hey, you know what? That's Peter. It's Peter Parker. It's Spider-Man. No, Spider-Man. That's Peter
Yeah,
Parker.
Peter Parker.
That's
Yeah,
Peter Parker. You got it?
Peter Parker.
You got it? That's
Yes,
that's
honey.
Peter
Okay, I
Parker's
get it.
dad.
Yes, thank
Get
you,
it?
honey.
Yeah.
This movie had so many, I think Lando uses the term Riker moments, where Riker looked at the screen and went, it's time travel, and had to tell the audience that. This movie is so full of that.
Right.
So many scenes.
Also in that scene, there is something that makes sense only if you know the comic book, and otherwise is even stranger with a different character. There's that segment where she says, oh, Richard's away. He's in, I don't know, Mumbai, Shanghai, somewhere. Now, if you don't know the comics, that would seem odd to you because most people, because it's implied he's in the service of some kind of service. You don't say something like that if, they're just traveling. You would know where they were. But no matter what, you would know where your spouse is in the world. That's something that, like a military veteran, where it's like, oh, they're constantly being transferred and moving around. And that will seem strange even then, because I'm pretty sure even military spouses know where their spouses are at all times. It makes sense. And you would sit there and go, what is that? And it's because in the comics, Peter Parker's parents were revealed to be spies. They were counterintelligence spies or something like that. And they weren't even dead. He thought they were dead, and then they came back, and then they died again. So again, if you don't know the comics, this movie makes no sense. It's completely incomprehensible.
In the comic books, you never really cared about what happened to Peter Parker's parents. You just knew that he lived with his aunt and uncle, and they were more or less his mom and dad. And it's just an accepted thing. Like, that was something they didn't need to really go into. There was no real, that added nothing to the movie other than if it was supposed to be fan service, it was horribly done.
Horribly.
There was no need for that whole Peter Parker storyline at all. Cause I don't even think that happened in the original comic book because she didn't, in the original comic book, Spider-Man encountered her a long time later or something like that. And it was kind of like, yeah, I know what you are. I'm kind of related to all you guys. We're all this big thing or whatever. But in this movie, it felt really hollow and dumb. There was like, why are we even, it took too much away from the story they should have been telling. Like, they didn't really need to have any of, like, that whole baby shower scene. It's like, we already get it from the hospital scene, which you could have done better. She's not good with kids or whatever. So it was like, you just wasted 10 minutes of our lives on this movie where you could have been telling a better story that more fits the character and the other characters in the movie. Correct. Like, there was that scene was just pointless. There was why is this here? We're watching this going, okay, I get what it's supposed to be for, but it's horribly done and useless and meaningless.
Yes, except to make you not like the main character. That's its only real purpose. Now,
can I jump ahead a little bit real quick?
Absolutely, why not? Okay. After all, the web is large and mysterious, and we can go wherever we want in it because
there was a part of the movie
has given us these powers. Go for it.
Where me and my buddy were watching the movie, and we're like, what the hell? Where there's a part where she has to get somewhere, and through her Madam Web futuristic powers, she knows that an ambulance is going to be pulling up in front of this house, and she knows, like, Ben Parker's in there and somebody else is in there, and they run into a house to do a medical call. And then she walks up and she's like, sorry guys, and she steals the ambulance. So if you're the hero of this movie, obviously the paramedics have been called to this house for a medical emergency. They're there to take care of somebody. And then what happens if the person's having a heart attack or something comes outside and the ambulance is gone? Like, what kind of a hero steals an ambulance to get where they're going to go? It just seemed like you're supposed to be the hero, and no hero is going to steal an ambulance from somebody that just it just didn't seem right. We were like, that was one of those things that made us hate her more. We're like, you're a really shitty hero. Like, what kind of a hero steals an ambulance from a house where somebody's getting medical attention from? Steal a car, whatever. But
now, you are correct that I thought the same thing. They do give an explanation for it, which is that was the ambulance to get the wife who had just gone into labor and they were already on their way to the hospital. But regardless, that doesn't mean that they wouldn't get another call and not have a way to get there. So it is
something. You don't steal an ambulance,
no. Listen,
or at least when it's actively being used.
This is one of the most unlikable groups of main characters that has ever been in a modern film. I mean, top to bottom.
Hero-wise, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The teenagers at least get a pass in that they are teenagers. So, teenagers are assholes. We all were. So I kind of let that one go. But the problem is, that's supposed to be counterbalanced by the adult. The adult then should be the one who is patient and understanding, or at least feels like they are not pettier than these teenagers, which she clearly is. But in any event, we then get this she gets this near-death accident where she goes into the water and somehow that activates her powers, I guess. I don't know what else would have done it. But we get multiple scenes of the guy with a terrible overdubbing as he has... This is, by the way, I made a very specific point about this in my short review. The deceptive trailer for this shows the characters in their costumes, which is a lie. It is a lie. You will never see them do anything outside of short action sequences in a premonition. But they
were in their costumes for maybe 4 minutes in the movie tops.
I think that's what I think. I said 3. So yes, right around there. And it's in a premonition. At no point outside of a dream and one end sequence where they're kind of just standing there, do you see them do anything. The fact that that was put in the trailer is beyond the normal level of manipulation the trailers do. That is an outright lie. Fuck you, whoever made this trailer. You are trying to sell a movie that does not have what you're saying it has. That is not all right with me. That's beyond just the normal. Wasn't cutting room floor stuff where it was there and then they cut it. No. They put that in there to get people to think you would see these heroes in action. You do not. And the shame of it is, I Their costumes aren't bad, especially the black and white one. I thought that costume was great. I would have watched a movie with those characters actually doing things and probably been more into it. Even if it had been a janky mess, at least it would have had cool costumes. But no, you're not going to get that. So give up on that fantasy before you ever wander into this, should you be so inclined to go into this movie willingly. So we get the overdubbed guy who, again, mouth does not match words about 40% of the time. And then we get a long set of sequences showing Cassie figuring out that she has precog powers. And it's exactly what you would expect, where she's getting these deja vu sequences. And, you know, it's one of these things where in real life, I think this is probably about how long it would take somebody to believe that what they were experiencing wasn't a brain tumor.
Psychotic episode.
Yes. So in terms of real life, the amount of time that has to pass for this is fine, but you don't do that in a movie because we get it. We got it. You could have done that once or twice, have her have the medical checkup, and let's move this movie forward. This movie did not need to be 2 fucking hours long. And this is why it's 2 hours long, is because there's so much unnecessary nothing. Stuff that really doesn't advance anything. Like, we get it. She's having precog shit. We got it. Let's go. So then we get to...
We get it. She doesn't like children. She's going to be a bad mother. We get it. Move on.
Yes. Which, by the way, it is strange to me that, again, that she's an EMT and that she bothers even saving anybody. This is the type of person who would only save herself. In fact, if anything, what they should have done, advice to screenwriters, is if you're going to do this version of a character, like this, following this movie's template, let's say, without changing anything, then if you're going to be doing a spider person thing anyway, and you're going to invoke Spider-Man through surrounding elements anyhow, then what you do is you have her see one person get killed and ignore it. And then that person gets killed in front of her, like in a, I don't know, like a purse theft or something. Like you replicate Uncle Ben. You redo Uncle Ben, and she realizes that she can save lives using this, and she won't let this, capital W, won't let this happen ever again, all capitals, ever and again. And then that's what leads to her saving the girls. Instead, you have this, frankly, mean bitch of a woman. I'm sorry, but it's the only term that makes fucking sense with what this movie is giving us. That doesn't seem like she would go out of her way to save anybody, even her friends, really. And she just now is going to randomly start protecting 3 girls against a what do they call him, ceiling crawling guy, which I thought was hilarious. I love the fact they call him that.
They described him, but they described him as a spider person. And it was really bad because the camera like focuses on her and hangs on her for a second. She's like, and he was climbing up the walls and walking on the ceiling. He was like a spider person.
Yeah.
And it's like, wah, wah.
Right.
They can't say Spider-Man. It's like, well, if you can't do that, then don't even put that in the movie.
Well, because Spider-Man doesn't exist yet. Lando pointed that out to me because I made the same complaint. He's like, well, yeah, but doesn't this take place before Spider-Man? I'm like, oh, yeah, it does. It's just because we've seen Spider-Man so much, we're used to him being around. But, of course, Peter Parker hasn't even been born yet, so they wouldn't know to say Spider-Man.
Gotcha. It was dumb. Don't care. It was stupid. Don't put it in the movie.
I agree. The clever little nods don't work. They don't work because the movie's not good enough.
They weren't clever at all. They were stupid. It was like, why bother? Don't even. Again, it's like the baby shower scene. Why was this even in here? This doesn't need to be in here.
Right.
You could have done it differently or something. It was almost like they made the movie, and I'm not positive about this, but from what I've read, I think Disney went in and said, this movie sucks. Do not put any references to Spider-Man in here because this is going to hurt the Spider-Man franchise. We get that you're making a Spider-Man-esque movie, but this is bad. This is going to hurt us later. Don't put this in the movie.
Yeah, originally I believe like some of the other Spider actors were supposed to be in this, and then they pulled that because they thought, no, we can't have any association here.
They wanted to have oh God, what was his name? The guy that was in the second the second series.
Andrew Garfield?
Yeah, Garfield was supposed to be in it. and they were all set to go, but they realized that the timelines didn't match up, so they couldn't have him in there. And then they were going to try to do something where they were going to have Tom Holland in there, and Disney was like, "Oh hell no,
Yeah,
no."
You could have
This
done
is
that
our
with the
moneymaker."
multiverse thing. That would have been okay, I guess. But no, they were never going to let that happen once they started seeing this movie. It was a trailer.
No way. So they really did. They wanted to have some kind of Spider-Man person in there, and the only ones that they had to deal with were Andrew Garfield and what's his name,
Tom Holland?
Not Tom Holland, the other one,
Or Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire. I don't know why I can't think right today, but
okay.
And Tobey Maguire, obviously he's kind of too old. He's long in the tooth. And they should still use Tom Holland, but it should be the way that it was in the last Spider-Man movie, where he's the older mentor. That which they're talking about doing that with the Miles Morales character, and that would be a great way to use that character.
It's great.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic, but they couldn't have any Spider-Man in the movie, so it was just they just kind of did what. To me, this whole movie was an exercise in bad editing, like you said, bad decisions. It's like, how did you do this? What else was there? Yeah, keep going.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sure I'll pick more.
No, that's fine, because I will credit this movie. It has a bit of audio coming up that is one of my favorite lines that I've captured for an evergreen clip, which is after they make their escape from the subway, where we get the Sims character, who is a Spider-Man villain, except he looks nothing like this. He looks like a little monkey man, really, if you ever see pictures of the character.
Yeah.
I like his outfit, actually. I think it's a good outfit. It doesn't look bad. It looks like a spider villain outfit. It doesn't make the movie any good. He still sucks as a character. I do like the fact that he's never wearing shoes. That's actually something that I think was kind of clever. That, yeah, if your sense of crawling and everything is why would you wear shoes? I actually kind of like the fact that the guy's almost never got shoes on. It's just a little character quirk that I was like, oh, there's a moment of cleverness in the movie that's 98% stupid. That's actually really neat. I like the fact that this guy doesn't wear shoes. I don't know why I picked up on that right away, but I thought, oh, a good decision. Wow, look at that. And the movie goes on, so she gets the girls and semi-abducts them and is then wanted by the cops because everybody thinks that for some reason nobody sees the spider guy. I guess that was supposed to be a power of his because they mention it, but it's never specifically said as if he can be invisible because he's not in the shadows enough to explain it. So I guess it's just that they don't notice him for some reason.
Yeah, but how do you not notice him when he's destroying a diner and walking on the ceiling?
I have to think that it's something where they just can't perceive him. I don't know. It's never explained, and who cares? This is a movie where it's,
Exactly.
By the time you get to that, you've accepted 100 other things that don't make sense, so whatever. So she
I know your audience is probably listening to it, okay, we get it, the movie sucks. But
oh, no. The clips sell what we're talking about. But to be specific, the movie doesn't suck. It's one of these movies where I realized that I was falling into a pattern where every about 10 to 15 minutes, I would think, why did the last 10 to 15 minutes lead to this? And that happened over and over where I'm sitting there. And then I would also think, why did that last 10 minutes last 10 minutes? We only needed maybe 3 to figure out what was going on there. And so again, it's not because the movie looks fine. There's actually good camera work. They're shooting some scenes in interesting ways. The action sequences aren't horrible when they happen. The CG in the beginning with the jumping people is bad, but a lot of the other CG is actually pretty good. I mean, better than I was expecting once I got to the halfway point of this movie. I thought, oh, this is going to fall apart now. They're just going to start sucking all the money out. But it doesn't really seem like they did. It's lit well. They're in locations. There's enough here that you can tell that there was money and at least some attempt to make it look good. So it's not just a bad movie. It's a movie that is a strange result of a lot of probably bad decisions on the fly. And that's what makes it worth talking about. If it was just a piece of shit, we probably wouldn't even really talk about it. But because they keep making these weird, odd choices, that's what makes it worth talking about. So she gets him into the jungle and she says, okay, I got to go for like 3 hours. I remember she said, I'm going to be gone for 3 hours. I don't know how she calculated that, but she did. Don't go anywhere.
She leaves them by themselves.
Right. And she
with
tells
a guy
them,
hunting them down.
And she has this line that I've cut down because this is going to be my evergreen version of this. But she has this dialogue that I'm not an actor. I don't know what it is to speak somebody else's words, but I cannot imagine any normal grown human being with a functioning brain is able to say these words any better than she does because it doesn't sound good, but I don't know how you can make it sound good. So I'm just going to play this clip. This is her instructions to them on what not to do while she's gone. I love this clip, sincerely. It is in my folder of clips that will never be erased. Here you go, everybody. Enjoy this.
Don't do anything dumb. Seriously, don't do dumb things.
Seriously, don't do dumb things.
Words of wisdom.
It's almost lyrical the way she says it.
Seriously, Joe, don't do dumb things.
Seriously, don't do dumb things.
Don't do dumb things.
Magnificent. That line made it worth watching the movie. I'll be honest with everybody, just so that I could capture that. Because if not for watching
one of the
this,
Ten Commandments in the Bible. Don't.
It should be. Seriously. Don't do dumb things. Yes, I would love to see, and there should be a nice break in the tablet where it's got the first line, a space.
If you make this into a two-part episode, that's the episode title for part 2.
No. This is all one episode. We're not cutting anything from this. Much like this film, intelligently or not, we're not cutting anything.
Again, I feel like I need to send you a therapy bill here.
No. This is highly enjoyable for me because the fact that I pulled 6 clips from this movie tells you that this was enjoyable for me. So she goes to her apartment to dig out this memory box she has of her mother, who she hates. We will find out that not only does she hate children, but she hates her mother up until a certain point, which I did not capture her ghost reunification with her mother, which is fantastic and is almost inexplicable as well. But at this point, we are made to understand she hates her mother. So she goes home and digs out this box because when she said the thing about spider people, I think it triggered a memory of something she'd seen in one of her mom's notebooks. So we now get this extended sequence, which I cut it together because she tries to climb the walls at one point because she thinks maybe she has spider powers, which both make sense and is hysterical the way it's shot in the film. But at least they didn't just shoot it flat. So I cut the gap in between where she falls down on the floor trying to climb the ceiling, which is pretty funny. But this is her working out to her cat out loud, which I kind of like. I actually have to admit, this is another clever way in a movie that if you want to have somebody say exposition out loud, but don't want to have it where it's 2 people and explain why somebody's talking to nobody, you use an animal as the human surrogate. This is actually not a bad storytelling technique. I'm absolutely serious when I say that. If you're writing a movie and you want the person to be speaking to nobody because it's a secret or something they're figuring out on their own, but you want the audience to understand because maybe you can't figure out how to do it from a visual perspective, have them talk to an animal. It makes a lot of sense, and then your main character doesn't seem crazy. Like in some movies, people just say shit out to the air, and they seem fucking crazy. If you have an animal there, it makes more sense. So this is her talking to her cat, which I believe you will hear a meow, just in case you were to miss that, where she's working out from her mom's notes what's going on, or at least possibly some clues.
Research on Amazonian spiders, peptides, more peptides. Where is it? Spider people. Las arañas. Have you ever heard of las arañas? Me neither. According to local folklore, they possess powers derived from spider venom and are incredibly fast, incredibly strong, and they can climb like spiders. Just like Ceiling Guy. Las arañas are said to possess a 6th sense, as if they had the ability to glimpse the future.
So yeah, Spider Guy or Ceiling Guy is my favorite name for a character. I actually wish they had just referred to him as Ceiling Guy for almost the whole movie as opposed to whatever his actual name was. So she figures out...
Did they ever name him? Did they ever actually give the villain a name?
They say Ezekiel because she says, I'm no match for Ezekiel when she's talking to Antonio Band, interesting guy. So she does say, I'm no match for... I think in that clip you'll hear her say, I'm no match for Ezekiel. So... in the meantime, the girls have wisely decided, knowing somebody's trying to kill them, that they will go to a diner and start dancing on a table to a Britney Spears song, which, again, this is a scene that is 4 times as long as it needs to be. You don't need all of this. But she figures out that Ceiling Guy is going to show up and try to kill, well, it will kill them if she doesn't hit him with a car, which is, I do like that scene where she drives into him with the car. Like, that's a a good use of her powers. It starts to show you what she can do if she figures out how to use them. But at this point, that still is largely instinctive, not her really knowing what's going on. But she has at this point at least figured out that she can trust what's happening, that this is in fact the future and she can alter it, which she does to the song itself. Like the song's beat is how she figures it out. That's relatively interesting, but it's one of very few moments where the character actually seems to be in control of anything, because the template for this in a normal film would be that by the midpoint, she has taken control of her power in some way and is now leveraging it to safeguard these children. But in this movie, she still barely knows how to make it work, and she still hates children. She actually wants to dump these kids back with their parents, and then, of course, conveniently, they all have parental problems.
Yeah.
They're either in another country or they're dead.
Yeah, that was
whatever.
another thing. Oh, my mom died. My dad's in another country. It was like, oh, conveniently. So,
Yes.
okay, so you're going to become the foster parent to all of these kids at some point, probably.
Right. And then
Yeah.
she has a sequence where she explains how CPR works to them.
Oh, God, that. Oh, my God. Yes,
Yes.
that. The
Now-
whole CPR scene. Again, it was like,
Yeah.
we're watching this and we're like, why are they performing CPR? Why are they spending this much time on it? Oh, that's right. At some point or another, we were like, she's going to die at some point, or somebody's going to die, and they're going to have to use CPR to save them.
So
Because as
this
Lando
is-
says, if you show a shotgun in the first act, it's got to go off by the third.
Yeah, this is Chekhov's gun. So this is a very common storytelling technique where if something specific is shown that doesn't really make sense otherwise, that means you're going to have to employ it later, which is the idea that if you show a gun in the first act, it better go off in the third or somewhere. It better go off before the whatever ends. So you know what this is for, but even here, the dialogue is fascinating. Yeah, I'm going to play it. We're going to get this scene where she's talking about how she needs more information, and it's just, well, let's just listen to it.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Nice job, Anya.
I've never said this before in my entire life, but you're a good teacher.
Well, I've been learning some things, too. About my mom.
Wait, so you do know this guy?
My mom did, I think. That's her.
She's really pretty. So this is because of you?
All I know is that she was researching spiders. In her notebook, there's some stuff about a local tribe in Peru that can do, like, crazy stuff.
What kind of crazy stuff?
Climb like spiders.
So is he one of them?
I need more information.
You're leaving.
I have to go and figure out what is going on.
How?
You have to go to Peru.
I'll be gone a week. I don't want to leave them, but he's out there looking for them, and they're relying on me, and I don't know how else to protect them.
Okay, look, I'm staying with Mary for a few weeks while Richard's out of town. He won't find them there. But Cassie, I can't pretend to understand what's going on here. Just be careful, okay?
I'll be back as soon as I can. Thank you, Ben. You didn't ask for any of this.
Okay, well, neither did you.
Now, again, Adam Scott acting in a different movie because his line delivery is good. He's pronouncing all of the words correctly, whereas at the beginning of the clip, if you listen to Dakota Johnson, her spacing of her sentence is weird and broken, almost as if they patched together multiple takes, but they didn't because you see her talking the whole time. And the whole interaction with, oh, you're a good teacher. Anyway, so it's so... Now, this is at over an hour. That scene's about an hour and 15 in the movie. She has still not really become a likable or softened character at all outside of her teaching them CPR, which seems weird because she's smiling and then she instantly goes cold again. And at this point, when they say the thing about, oh, your mother's pretty and she says nothing, that's because she still hates her mother at this point. She hasn't had her ghost reunion with her yet. And has to go, as you said, to Peru with no local knowledge, doesn't seem to be able to speak the language, just goes and is able to, I guess, intuitively figure out how to find the spider people. And she finds the guy who delivered her in the opening scene. Of course, now he is not covered in whale asshole gore and ropey things. Now he looks like he's a model for Dos Equis. And he then meets up with her, and we get this exposition on, why we're waiting for you, because I guess she's the most important Los Araños of all or something. I don't know, but here he is explaining how they were waiting for her.
My mom thought Los Araños were a myth.
What do you think?
I think she was crazy for coming here alone.
She came here hoping to extract healing properties from the spiders. She thought she was being protected.
By Ezekiel Sims?
His motives were selfish. He used your mom to find us, but because he stole the spider, he was cursed. And he's been trying to outrun his destiny ever since.
This is where my mom died?
And where you were born.
I don't understand why she risked my life to come here.
To see the future clearly, you have to heal the wounds of your past.
That sounds like literally every therapy session I've ever avoided.
You have to go back to your beginning and keep going past that.
There are powers you don't even know you're capable of.
Your thread did not start when you were born. Do you trust me?
Not really sure at this point I have a choice.
All right, couple things. First off,
That's where he pulls the Doctor Strange and pushes her spirit into the pool.
Yes, and I cut there because the audio would have been horrifically loud in your ears, so I stopped it there, so to spare everybody ear injury. But we're going to pick back up after the memory pool, which is what I call this scene, the memory pool scene. But I would actually probably lay some money down that this guy dubbed the other guy, because his voice sounds an awful lot like the other guy's voice, just lower and more gravelly.
I said that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was wondering that. I'm like, is this the same dude?
If you listen, it sure sounds like it. But what is impressive is, contrary to the other guy, the audio here with him, with the echo and everything, sounds really good. It sounds like they shot it there in some kind of set and captured the echo. Like, it's really good. That's where there's these moments where you sit here and go, no, somebody sometime knew what they were doing in this movie. This is not a total train wreck. Somebody knew how to make a movie at random points in this film, because it's lit well. The guy's, audio is good. There's the background sound effects. All that stuff is effective. And the dialogue, I do like when she says, every therapy session I've avoided, because that explains some things about that character. But, he's explaining the background, and how did he know that the mom was researching healing properties? Were they sneaking into her tent at night and reading her notebook? I hope that's what it was, because otherwise it makes no sense. But the idea of these creepy gore-covered people silently creeping in while she's asleep en masse and like reading her book and going, okay, should we kill her? Should we kill her? Should we kill this weird American woman? Oh, no. She's looking for healing stuff. No, this is okay. You got to pass.
Yeah, we'll let her go.
Out.
We're good.
Yeah, everybody out. Be quiet. Find your buddy. Everybody get out. Okay, we're fine. Don't leave any of the whale gore behind. Okay, good. We're gone. So they throw her into the memory pool. He pushes her into a memory pool, at which point she suddenly has explodey web psychic powers. And they include her going back in time and materializing, as far as I can tell, you tell me if I'm wrong, materializing right after her mother finds out that the fetus has a disease that cannot be detected in pregnancy. I read that. Several places pointed this out. The disease they talk about is not one that can be detected in utero. You find out after the fact, but we'll let that go because we're now an hour and 20-something minutes into a movie that barely has any logic to it. So whatever, who cares? And when she realizes that her mom was there to find the spider for a peptide that could cure her, she manifests. Her mom sees her, knows it's her daughter, I guess, psychically, sure. And then they have this big emotional embrace, and she's like, I'm so sorry I hated you for so long. Which, I don't know, if my ghost future daughter materialized, hugged me, and then implied that she spent most of her adult life hating me, I might have a few questions before she disappeared back into the ether. Otherwise, I might be in therapy for the rest of my fucking life. But that's what we get. Right? I mean, that was the scene, right? Am I wrong? Did I get any of that
you're
wrong?
absolutely right.
Okay. Yeah.
Another scene that made no damn sense at all.
No sense. So then she comes back and comes out of the pool, and this is where we get the line that you talked about very early on that is clearly a remix of the Peter Parker responsibility line. So let's listen to how smoothly they worked that in here so that you knew exactly what it was, but thought it was a really clever way of moving some words around.
I always thought my mom didn't care about me.
Sometimes you must sacrifice yourself for those you love.
I was there. I was in the room. I was in the room with her. How did you do that?
You did that. And now you're starting to see what you're capable of. You came here to learn the truth about your past. But you will leave ready to embrace your future.
Seeing into the future is no match for Ezekiel. I need to stop him before he kills those girls. But I can't do what he can do. I can't do the leapy, crawly, like, death poison.
You didn't get the gift of the greater physical strength or the ability to release poison.
But seeing into the future is only the start. Your mind has infinite potential. If you master your power, you can use the web to be in more than one place at the same time. You are the only one who can change the future. And when you take on the responsibility, great power will come.
And they say that twice in the movie, to my knowledge.
Did they say it? They probably did, but it's so
Later on,
it's so
she actually
clunky.
uses her powers, and you hear him in the back. I think.
That could
he
be.
says, I mean,
you know what?
With great power. Or with
No,
great
you're right.
responsibility comes great power.
Yes,
And
it's
like,
on the catwalk.
Again.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. That does happen again. That's right. I forgot. Yes, he does have his little secondary dialogue. But yes, apparently she. Now, this would, again, in a properly formatted film, this would be a scene where immediately the next thing we would see is her calling Ben and saying, look, I need to stay in Peru for another few days. Just keep the girls there till I get back. And then we would have a training montage where the guy would show her, here's how you use your powers. Because he drops the bomb that you have infinite potential. And when you figure out how to use your powers, you can do anything you fucking want. Have fun back in America. Bye. And then we're back. She just leaves. What? Yep. How did she? What? No manual, no cheat sheet, no VHS, or I guess at the time DVD saying powers 101 with great power. I mean, with great responsibility comes great powers. Here's how you weave the web, and a bunch of like step 1, concentrate. Step 2, drink 3 cans of Pepsi because they paid for product placement in this film, and you'll see it everywhere.
God, yes.
Everywhere.
Yeah, but then Pepsi didn't own that product placement. Pepsi was like, yeah, okay, we'll just forget we did that.
Would you?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like when McDonald's sponsored the Mac and Me movie and was like, no, we're never going to talk about this again.
I don't know, but they should, because what a film. So we get a bunch of chase scenes in the city, and we end up on the rooftop of a fireworks factory where she does the whole thing where she, for a second, is in 3 places at once, but then fails at that as well, and is knocked into the water. And here again, you tell me if you know how this happened. She goes from being a normal woman who just happens to hate most of the human beings that apparently her job is to save. She dies again. And when she is brought back via CPR, she is now blind and apparently can't walk.
Oh, that.
Yeah. I mean, the blind thing, there was something.
It happens at a fireworks factory. She gets thrown in the water, and apparently a firework shoots into the water and blows up in her face, and that's what blinds her.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, and I don't remember what paralyzed her, if it was a girder or something from the building that did it. But when the thing is, when they pull her out of the water, when the girl dives because she's about to die again, and then one of the spider girls jumps in the water and saves her and pulls her out. When they pull her out of the water, her eyes barely have anything on them. It doesn't look like it's
scars.
burned.
Right.
Yeah, nothing. So, I mean, I guess the flash of the fireworks supposedly blinded her, but I'm sure you're going to get to it. There are far bigger issues pertaining to that at the end of the movie. But yeah, that's apparently what happened. When the final fight, the final boss fight scene happens inside of this warehouse. I think it's a warehouse full of fireworks on the waterfront.
Okay, you know what? I'm watching the scene right now, and yes, I'm watching.
It's
the
a girder
end
from the
scene.
Pepsi sign, is what it is. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, nothing. There's nothing that indicates why she's paralyzed, but they do show a firework that goes across her face. But because she's not scarred, I don't think I even noticed that because there's no scar tissue. She looks fine.
That's what I'm saying. When they pull her out of the water, she looks fine. So, the only thing they could have, maybe it could have been handled different or something. I don't know.
You know
but
what?
I remember watching
now,
that scene, getting pissed going. Go ahead.
Smallest bit of something on her face, but it is not. Look,
yeah,
I have had a firework blow up on my knee, and my knee looks like Chunky Hamburger where the firework hit it. And this was when I was 15, and it still don't look right. There's no way a giant firework goes across your face to the point where it blinds you, and all it looks like is that maybe you scratched yourself with your nail in 3 or 4 places. I'm just saying, This is not how human beings' bodies respond to burning. Anyway,
I remember watching that scene right before she went in the water, and me and my buddy were kind of pissed. We're like, oh, so it's Highlander.
Oh, it definitely is trying to be, yeah. Yeah.
We're like, they're fighting on a big lit up sign that's got sparks and stuff flying everywhere. Never mind the fact that other than the fact that she can see the future and knows it's going to happen, she has no superpowers where realistically, this guy would just crush all of these people with his abilities. Because that's another thing the guy we haven't talked about yet. One of his powers, besides having super strength and Spider-Man abilities, he can't shoot webs, but his grip when he touches people poisons them and kills them.
Yeah,
it's like a neurotoxin or something like that. Those are his walk on walls, super strength, and he could touch people and poison them. Again, these are things that go along with being bit by a super-powered spider. These are powers you would expect in some way to do with Spider-Man. I don't know where getting bit by a spider goes to give you futuristic seeing powers. Or
the only thing I conjured as an explanation, because you have to do a lot of this that in this movie.
Enhanced Spidey sense? Is that where you're going?
Anybody who thinks this is a dumb film, not for the amount of brain work you have to go in to make it make sense. Absolutely not. This is the opposite of a dumb film. You better come into this thing with a cheat sheet, like a piece of paper, and start showing your work, because you're going to have to connect a lot of dots for yourself.
I had no idea you would break this movie down this much, but okay.
Oh, yeah. Because that's what I'm saying is, when you say, well, it's a dumb movie, we get it. No. That's a pass that I am not going to give this movie. This is not a dumb movie. This is a movie where people consciously did these things and thought they would somehow work as a cohesive film, when there is no way that a functioning human being who is not constantly drunk or under the influence of something could reasonably think that. So I hope everybody writing this was on coke the whole time, because otherwise this web does not hold together. But the only explanation I can come up with, because the guy does say, he says, oh, well, you didn't get these powers, but you have this one.
And how does he know that?
Well, the only way, because he knows why the mother's there, which is because she thinks the spider's bite can cure this autoimmune disease, I have to assume that because she had this disease, the interaction with the spider bite manifested in these unique powers. Because that disease, I believe, specifically causes blindness. I think if I read about the disease correctly, and I can check right now, but I believe it does manifest as blindness. It is a real disease.
They could have wrote that into the movie where, okay, it just couldn't save my eyes. It saved everything else. Because it said something about the child. She was going to die, or I think it was a terminal disease or something
Here
like
it
that.
is. I'm going to mispronounce this. Myasthenia gravis is a long-term neuromuscular junction disease that leads to varying degrees of skeletal muscle weakness. Most commonly affected muscle areas are eyes, face, swallowing, and it can cause your eyes to do things that are unusual, not turn bright blue because of a firework. See, that's the thing is, if the disease had triggered this, if suddenly they had said, well, at some point these powers might stop your body from being able to fight all the effects of the disease. So if you use them, understand that again, this goes into power responsibility. You can save lives, but it may cost you something. And then she does it, and suddenly it does this to her. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great that solves so many of the movie's problems right there.
Yep, right there.
That would have fixed it. There was no need for half of the stuff that we had to go through. It's like the disease. All right, you got the disease there. This is the stuff that it causes. And like you said, if you use your powers, this is what's keeping. They did the same thing in the X-Men where it was like, I can make it so your powers will work, but you're going to be stuck in a wheelchair and you're going to be paralyzed and bald or whatever. Yes. And it worked that was First Class, I believe it was. Was it First Class? I don't remember. It was one of the later X-Men movies. So yeah, they could have done something like that. And it would have made a lot more sense than, okay, well, if you use your powers, those are what's keeping you from this happening. But if you use your powers, this is what's going to happen. And again, you're correct. The sacrifice. That's the sacrifice she has to make to be able to do what she does and save lives. That would have made so much more sense. So much more.
Yeah.
And
there's such a simple way to write this movie, because I'm not a writer. And I can explain to somebody how you do this movie with basically the same setup. Mm-hmm. And just using a simple Marvel formula application is 90 minutes, top to bottom. First half hour is you set up Cassie and her powers and, maybe
one of the girls. You didn't need all three of them.
Well, yes. If you set up the powers properly, she never needs to meet them at all because her precog abilities will connect her to them. So you don't ever need to see them. She only needs to know they're in the city. That's it. But set her up, make her likable. That's kind of important, I think. Second act is she has to convince them that she's not crazy. She goes to them and says, I know this stuff's happening, and she has to demonstrate it somehow. And that's maybe, the whole seeing the future, stop you from dropping your glass of water, or, you're about to die, the final destination thing. She does that for each girl. She builds the team. And then in the third act is where she guides them as they find their abilities. Because again, they never use their abilities. In that final fight, none of them do anything. She does. No. She starts using her kind of prediction thing to block stuff, but they're just like, which, you know what? If you're trying to build a movie around empowered women, which I think is what maybe they were aiming for, I don't think you accomplished your goal. You made all the women seem either unlikable or powerless. And that doesn't seem like the message you maybe want to be projecting. So we get this final shot where she's floating somehow, because we see her in a wheelchair with terrible sunglasses. Then we see her in her costume.
Yes. Oh.
With terrible sunglasses. And then we see the three of them, and their costumes are pretty cool. I actually like the young women's costumes look good. And yet we never get to see them.
They all look really good Spider Women. But
yes.
You see them very briefly, I think in the middle of the film, very, very quickly, where they're supposed to be killing off the most interesting guy in the world. And then you see them at the end, like climbing on buildings and stuff like that.
Right.
And then that whole end sequence, did that just not feel shooed in? Like she's sitting in this really shitty, she's got these glasses. We're watching the movie and I'm like, holy shit, she's blind. I'm like, they're going to give her a really stupid wheelchair and they're going to give her some really stupid glasses. I'm telling you, they're going to do it. And then they show it and I'm like, oh my, we were just laughing because they didn't even look cool. They just looked they looked terrible. And the costume, the wheelchair, all of it looked horrible. And even her dialogue was very stiff and robotic. And they're like, well, I don't know. Do you want to go ahead and describe it? Because you're the one that's on the tangent on here. I don't want to get in your way.
No, I mean, you're exactly right. It doesn't. It's just an end scene where she's suddenly now they're all friends. The woman comes in and says, "Oh, are you family members?" "Yes, they're all my family." Whoa. Wait a minute. You were still actively hostile to them until 20 minutes ago, and now suddenly we're all palsy. Everybody's friendly and. I mean, don't get me wrong. She did demonstrate her powers, so I don't see any reason. I understand why the girls would suddenly be friendly with her, but I guess it's a near-death experience. But it's just so, as you shoehorned, sudden, not set up properly. We don't get a lot of scenes where she's there with them and softening up. They never do that. Again, in a 2-hour film, spend 10 minutes where she's realizing that the reason that she was hostile towards children is because she never really had any experience with kids, and her only experience with parenthood was negative until she found out her mom actually loved her. Like, there's ways to do this that we've seen in other movies that have a better sense of writing. And instead, it's just all, okay, we only have 4 minutes left of film, so we need to really quickly establish you as the Professor X of the Spider Girls, and we need to show them in costume as a setup for a movie that's never going to happen. So let's just do that really quickly. Oh, what's that? Oh, we didn't get a costume for Mrs. Johnson? I don't know. There's some spandex over there, and my grandmother's glasses from when she had eye surgery 2 years ago are over there. Could you just spray paint them with like metallic red? Yeah, it's fine. Whatever. We'll blur it. It's okay. Just throw it on.
So bad.
It's
and
awful.
Then they're like, so, because she's still able to see the future the way like Paul Atreides is after he loses his eyes to a stone burner or whatever.
Yeah,
but they're like, so, everything's going to be okay now. And she goes, oh yes, everything is going to be okay. I can see everything.
I think they say something like, oh, can you see us? And she's like, yes. And your future is fantastic. And then it's like, da 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 da, spider people, ba 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 ba, and then it's just credits.
But
and
I wish you'd have taken that dialogue and sampled it, because it's so bad. It's so like, all right, that'll do it. Cut. That's it.
I think the reason I didn't is the music was so loud over it that it wasn't really clear. Even there was it was a badly done ending. You're right. It was the dialogue. Go look it up here for yourself, everybody, if you want to torture yourself.
I really think that they had to go back and like refilm that. And at that point, the actresses were just like, we're so fucking done with this, at that point.
Yeah.
So but I have some theories about this. Number one, from what I've been reading everywhere, a lot of these, like the Morbius, Kraven the Hunter, all of these movies, a lot of these actors, I don't know this for positive, but they're intimating that they were told that they were going to be part of the MCU Grand Spider. They didn't realize that Sony and Marvel were two different entities. So from what I have read and things like that, Sony was kind of like, yeah, you're going to be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe now, and you might show up in one of these Spider-Man movies, and so we'll take this job, sure. Superhero movies are huge right now. Pretty much everybody at this point's been in a superhero movie of some kind or another, or a show or something. So they were like, yeah, of course we'll do this. This is one of the things, and, we could become famous off of this. And a lot of them don't realize that when they're doing these Sony movies, that they're not part of the MCU. They're part of this separate little pod Sony Spider-Verse. And from what I understand, Sony has to release a Spider-Man movie of some kind every so many years. I think it's every 4 years or something, to be able to keep the rights to that franchise, to be able to use those characters and be able to use that world, which is why we're seeing these movies like Morbius. Like, nobody asked for a Morbius movie, which I didn't think was that bad. The Venom movies with they're making these Spider-Man movies with no Spider-Man in them. Like, I don't know how they managed to pull off these Venom movies with no Spider-Man in it, but okay, sure. The Morbius movie, I could kind of see that one as being its own origin story of some kind or whatever. But I don't, I think they just made this movie as quick as they could and did what they could with it, because like, we have to have this movie out by this time. And if we don't have this movie out, then we lose the rights to the Spider-Verse or whatever you want to call it. Because really, the only thing that's come out of good Sony-wise, in my opinion, is Into the Spider-Verse, and that's because it's animated, and I think that's handled by a different part of the studio, so they kind of keep their hands off of that and kind of stay out of it for the most part. But the actual physical movies, I think me and you were talking to Gene St. Jean about this at one time, about how do these things happen, and there's contracts and all these other things that are involved with it, but really Sony just keeps making these movies, and I think Sony actually kind of needs Marvel to come in and say, no, you're doing this wrong, do this, do that. Like, I know the Marvel movies haven't been that great as of late, but they're still better than what that was. So they kind of need each other. Like, it's like, if they had taken this movie to Marvel and said, hey, this is bad, how do we fix this or whatever, but they don't want to involve Marvel into it because that's taking a cut of the money away or what have you. Sony doesn't want to give up on this franchise, because even though that movie sucked, it's still, I don't think it made its money back though, but they're still able to make money off of these movies because from what I've learned also, like through the Internet of Things and Internet and chat and stuff, there's still a lot of people out there that don't realize that Sony and MCU are two different entities. Because I was in one group that's like, yeah, this is another horrible Marvel movie. Or I'm like, it's not a Marvel movie. It's a Sony movie. Yeah, it's got the Spider-Man characters in it, and it's got the Marvel logo on it, so it's a Marvel movie. And it's like, no, you people don't get it. And Sony's kind of capitalizing on that, in my opinion. I think that they're doing that because I know a lot of people are starting to figure it out. People are starting to put 2 and 2 together, but they're like, just make the movie. Just make the movie. We got to keep this franchise. We got to keep this. We have to hold on to this, franchise or whatever the hell it's called. IP, that's it. So I think they kind of need one another. They need to go to Marvel and be like, hey, what can we do to make these movies better? Because there's definitely a lot of, you can look at Sony and just see them making these movies and going, we're just making this for the money. We're not trying to put any kind of a story in it. Now, granted, Marvel, Disney is doing the same thing, but at least Disney tries to put some heart and soul into their movies. They try to have something there. They try to have some kind of even if like the last the Marvels movie or whatever, as bad as it was, there was some kind of heart or something to it. Whereas the Sony movies, it's just like, just let's crank these out. We're just making like popcorn, cotton candy movies. Let's just crank these out as fast as we can and try to make enough money off of them. And I think it's to a point now where, like, after this Madam Web movie, like, they're probably shitting their pants about Craven, because people are going to be like, nah, we saw Madam Web, and you know how this, and like when the Star Wars movie came out, people were like, no, we're not going to go see Solo because we're in such protest about that last Star Wars movie. We're just not going to go see this movie. And so many people ragged on this movie that when Craven comes out, no matter how good it is, which I don't think it will be, but people are just going to be like, no, we're done with you. And this could be what gets people to the point where Sony's just like, it's not worth us keeping this IP anymore. Or that, or they keep releasing movies just to keep the IP in spite of it. But I think they need one another, because every time that Marvel's involved with it, like the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies have all been pretty solid for the most part. At least I thought they were. But I just don't think Sony can do this on their own. Not with what the empire that Marvel Disney has created. When you're trying to do separate off to the side, it's kind of why it didn't work with the X-Men either. The X-Men eventually started to go down too, because it didn't have the same heart and everything. You can't tell stories in the same universe from 3 different perspectives, where you're not going to see Luke Skywalker walking around in Mordor, if that makes any sense. So they kind of need each other for. Well, I don't know if Marvel needs Sony. I'll put it that way. But Sony, I think, does need Marvel.
I don't know if Sony needs Marvel, and I'll explain why. But it requires them to do something that they're apparently unwilling to do. So, as far as I understand it, there is an agreement between Marvel and Sony where Sony can't use Spider-Man, at least not directly, without Marvel, I guess, direct. In other words, Spider-Man movies have to come from Marvel, and everything else outside of Spider-Man that's associated with Spider-Man can come from Sony. That's my understanding of the way the deal is structured. So they are cooperating.
Exactly.
But one side does the Spider-Man movies, which Marvel correctly has guessed, or I don't know if correctly is the right word, but based on the way Sony's doing things, they have correctly judged that having Spider-Man is all they really need. Now, if Sony was smart, which they're clearly not, instead of constantly chasing the shadow of Spider-Man, who they cannot use, based on their agreement, they can't use him. Now, Venom proved you don't need him. Venom worked. It's a weird... I love Venom. I think Venom is so off the wall. Don't get me wrong. It's not really a good movie, but it proved you don't need Spider-Man to make something that is fascinating. I enjoyed the hell out of Venom 1.
They
Venom
were okay.
2 was weaker because
they could have done a lot more with Carnage.
Yeah,
but
Carnage.
They didn't want to go
Carnage
the
is
rated R rating, because then you lose money, because then certain people can't get into it. They don't sell as many tickets.
Also, in my opinion, Carnage is a shit villain. Carnage is not good. So I don't know that you could have done much more with a character that's basically just a psycho. But I also think that what they did with it was the worst possible version of a character that's not that great to begin with. But putting all that aside, what they can do, and this movie demonstrates that they can do it, they just don't know how to do it, is why are you chasing Spider-Man? Why are you going after Spider-Man when you can just make a female Spider-Man? They already exist. Silk is there. Spider-Woman is there. I know there's one other one. Spider-Gwen is the alternate version, but Spider-Woman and Silk, and I know there's one more who I'm forgetting, are already canon characters, meaning C-A-N-O-N, not canon, the canon movies. Boy, would those have been something back in the 80s. But just build a new set of movies around a female spider character. Number one, you pull in a whole demographic that's underrepresented. So right there, you're already playing into what people seem to want, which is more strong female characters. Fine. Don't just make a fake one. Use a real one. Use Spider-Woman, who is a good character in the comics. She has existed for a long time. Make Spider-Woman your character. You have all the villains. You have Kraven, obviously. You have Morbius. You probably have a whole bunch of other ones that you can use because that agreement allows you to. So why not just build your own Spider franchise? Why can't there be two Spider people? And if it's successful enough, eventually, guess what? They'll team up, and there's your Spider team-up movie. Why are you chasing Spider-Man? I like Spider-Man just fine. I'm not going to pretend I'm the biggest fan of the character, but I've read a lot of the comics, and a lot of them are very good. And I love the black suit. The best character redesign in all of comics history, bar none, was dumping that stupid fucking red and blue suit for the coolest fucking superhero suit you'll ever see, which is jet black with the white spider, the white shit on the back of the hands, dots, and the white eyes. That blue and red thing is for suckers. It's stupid. I fucking hate that suit. So when they redesigned that, I loved it. That's what Spider-Man should look like. I adore that suit. But you don't have to chase that character. You do the Spider-Woman suit or the silk suit they had in the movie that looked like that. That's cooler looking than Spider-Man's. I hate to break it to everybody, but it's cooler looking because that suit's fucking lame. Do that. Let it go. Let Peter Parker go. Let him go. Let him drift off into the Marvel films and make a female spider character. Why is this so difficult? It's not.
I don't think it'll work now because of the wokeness. Like Marvel has tried very badly to shove female characters down people's throats, and the only
but that's more of an argument to do it. You can show how it can be done the right way.
I don't think
Marvel
Sony can do it the right way, though.
Well, what I'm saying is, I think a lot of Sony's problem, specifically with the Spider films, is that they keep chasing after Spider-Man's shadow. That they keep wanting to make it somehow tangentially tied in, and they won't just let go of that thing and have their own version of these characters. Now, it wasn't as much in this movie, but it really kind of was, because what Madam Web was really kind of being was the older Peter Parker from the Spider-Verse films. That's what they were sort of aiming for.
You know what? Why don't you Google, because you're faster at this stuff than I am, see if Sony actually has the rights to Spider-Woman for them to be able to do that. Because I recall Disney talking about possibly bringing a live-action Miles Morales into the MCU, and also at some point a different bunch of Spider-Women.
Oh my God, there's so many. Hold on, let me scroll way down. These are alphabetical, and there are 684 characters that Sony owns. So let me go to the S's.
You should be able to just Google this. Does Sony own the
Spider-Woman?
Spider-Woman?
No, they've got her. They've got every incarnation of her, which there are 1, 2. I'm sorry, they don't have the first version of her. They only have 2, 3, 4,
Jessica
5.
Drew. No, not Jessica Drew.
No, they don't. Yes, you're right. No, they don't have her.
Jessica Drew. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't have her, but they have 4 other ones. So, including one that's Mary Jane Watson, apparently was number 5.
Okay,
Parker
so
was apparently
the loophole in that right there might be that because they don't have the rights to the first one, they might not have the rights to the name Spider-Woman. So they would have to call her something else. Even though they don't have the rights to the first one, there might be something in the contract where Spider-Man and Spider-Woman are not to be touched.
Based on how this list is structured, I don't know that that's true. Either way, let's say it is. Let's say they can't call her Spider-Woman. Fine. Call her, I don't know, just call her the Spider. Call her, I don't know. People are smarter than me. They can come up with a fucking name. You can come up with something. Or they never come up with a name. What?
She's a shared character. Both Marvel and Sony have the rights to use her.
Okay.
After a fashion, it reads Jessica Drew and specifically listed listed related characters. So
Okay.
that's probably a situation where they have to share the character.
Then don't use Jessica Drew. Just don't use her. Use one of the other ones and call it something
could be the
else.
Spider-Woman name in general. But again, you're running into the situation of, okay, it's Spider-Woman, but you're not calling her Spider-Woman, you know, which is probably what they were trying to do with Madam Web for the most part. I don't know. But again, you could do Silk. There are other characters you could do. So
yeah, who
I don't
are basically
know if
all
Sony's capable.
Well, the problem I think is that I do think that they are desperately hoping Marvel will absorb them back in or let them play in their playground, which they're not going to, because they haven't proven they can make a good movie. But I think at some point, one of the things that I think makes Venom interesting is that it jettisoned any of that. It was just, good or not, it was doing its own thing. That's what they have to start doing. It worked for Marvel till Marvel started clamping down on it. You know, Guardians, the reason Guardians was such an interesting breakthrough is because it was such a different film. They let it be weird and quirky and different. And then the problem is they started trying to format everything. And sure enough, you know, except for the Guardian movies, which have always had their own identity, important thing right there, they've been increasingly failing to generate the same amount of money because people are tired of formulas. Do the same thing. Oh, this is like Spider-Man, but it's not. And the wokeness, you know what? That's all horse shit. It's all horse shit.
Oh, it
It's
is.
made
Yeah,
up,
a lot of it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of. I've only really seen that from the. It's weird. It's like it goes back to what I was saying about movies earlier. It's like I've got better things to do than to go online and be that guy that attacks every Star Wars or every Marvel. Or
Right.
if I don't like it, whatever. You know, maybe the next one that comes out I'll like or whatever.
But the reality is, too, that label works because a lot of times it's applied to movies that are performative and not actually doing something that is meaningful. They're just saying, like the thing in the Avengers that lots of people point to, and they're correct, where they just have a splash of all these women standing there, which is just so...
Like an Avengers Endgame where
that's
it was kind of
exactly.
shoehorned with, that scene. Yeah, that was
It's
like...
very obvious what that is. That's not
Yeah.
fooling anybody with a brain. We know what that is. That's insulting. That's not
They kind of
empowering.
screwed
That's
up
insulting.
by not giving Black Widow her movie sooner because she really did and her movie wasn't that bad, but by the time it was released, it's like it really doesn't matter anymore because that phase of Marvel is over with.
And that's what I'm saying is when you actually look at what they've done, it isn't what they keep saying it is because they would have handled it better. So if you do an actual movie where the female character is legitimately well written, then no one's going to care whether Spider-Man's around. If they just want to see a superhero beating the shit out of somebody, honestly, except for people who have their heads jammed up their asses, reasonable, rational people don't give a shit about gender. They don't care about any of that shit. They want a character that they like and they want to see succeed. You do that, all the rest is detail work and doesn't matter. That's what they're failing.
I don't think they get it though. I really don't because
I agree, but I believe that a lot of that is tied to
I see where you're coming from, and I'm not going to argue it. I think it's a decent idea where they again quit chasing Spider-Man. It's gone. Forget it. You're getting your money from Marvel when you guys do movies together.
Yep.
That's fine. You know, and maybe if you come up with a good enough script and go to Marvel and say, hey, listen, this is what we want to do. We want to bring Spider-Woman in. Do you want to work with us? So maybe we can, but it's a money. I really think it's a money thing. Don't share any money with, Sony wants their money. They don't, the only reason they're doing the Spider-Man thing is because the Spider-Man movies make a tremendous amount of cash. You know,
but as you said, that's going to stop happening with their movies because they're so terrible. So, that you can get the money from Marvel, and I guess you could just keep losing money on these IP grabs. But if the IP grabs aren't making you money and you're losing money, what is the point? So to your example, maybe they'll just give up. But I think that's
what'll come down to is they're either going to start using these movies as tax write-offs because to make these movies it costs a considerable amount of money.
Sure.
And a lot of times they got to go out. Okay, well you're going to fund some of it. You're going to fund some of it. You're going to fund some of it.
Right.
So it might just get to a point where they're like, okay, we're just going to keep making these shitty movies, but we'll cut the budget on them. We'll get no-name actors, but they're going to do what they're going to do to try to hold on to that IP for as long as they can, because this is how Hollywood works. There's lots of IPs that are out there that people just own them so that nobody else can make money on them.
And that's where I agree with you. You're right. Sony can't do this because they can't let go of this very short-sighted way of thinking. And if they don't do that, then they will eventually probably give up or just pump out some way of preserving the IP, and they'll just let it wither.
That's
and
what
that's,
I can see that happening more so than anything.
No, I don't disagree. I think that is a shame because I don't think this is what, and some people will say you're out of your mind when I say this, but I absolutely mean this because we've already seen evidence that Marvel is far from bulletproof. There is no reason, none, that Sony could not get Marvel chasing them. No reason. If they started to make really well-made, efficient, interesting, inventive movies using these C-level or whatever characters, Marvel will start chasing them because Marvel's formula is failing them. And if Sony could make 3, 4, 5, I mean, they did it with Spider-Verse. Look how big Spider-Verse was. That's their golden ticket right there. But do a couple of those in live action, Marvel's going to come to you. They'll come to you because they're flailing.
Again, I really don't think Sony can do it.
I don't either, but think
they're capable. I'm not really, and I don't really have an answer for why the Into the Spider-Verse movies had such a good story. Maybe because they concentrated more on the story.
Because they weren't live action. They don't care.
They could do a lot more with animation than they can with live action. So they could,
yes, I guarantee you that an executive would say, "Oh, well, that's for kids anyway, so I don't give a shit what you do. Do whatever you want. Just this is your budget." I'm not even going to look at it.
But you'd think by now they would go, wait a minute, these Into the Spider-Verse movies have made a lot of money, and we've got one more coming. What else can we do here? Let's cash in on this. This is working.
But my hunch now is that it's the one thing that's working. And so they're going to be like, we're not touching it. This is making money. Let them keep doing this.
They've only got one more movie left, so at that point...
What comes after that will be the interesting part.
What comes after that's going to be live action Miles Morales, because even Disney has made no secret that he's coming, and they've already, they haven't announced it officially, but Will Smith's son is supposed to be playing. What's that?
It makes total sense. No, it makes total sense. I mean, that's where you go. That is how you avoid the actor aging out. The character is already proven successful. Again, you get diversity in a character that was written. This is the important difference, everybody. This is what I mean is the difference between performative and meaningful. That character was created as a true diversity character, not playing to the idea of it. It was well before this became the popular term that companies just threw on everything and splashed on there, even if they didn't give a shit about it, which most of them truly don't, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. That character was created by somebody with the integrity of creating a character that could reflect different people. Because I believe his son is half something. I'm pretty sure that the writer, I can't remember the writer's name. Might be Brian Michael Bendis. I don't remember. I believe his son is
that came about because
mixed
of
race
the show Community, where Daniel Glover said, man, I want to be Spider-Man. And somebody said, there's a black Spider-Man? He goes, yeah, why can't there be a black Spider-Man? And they kind of paid tribute to that in the last Into the Spider-Verse, because there's a scene there where Danny Glover is sitting there inside of like that little laser cell in live action, and he looks at me and says, yeah, what's up?
Oh, yes, you're right. Here it is. You're right. Yeah. And Anthropology 101 was the episode. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's where the whole Miles, the guy was watching the Community. He was, you know what? Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. So, it's plus they've also, like in the first Spider-Man movie, they mentioned Miles Morales. He says, yeah, my little cousin Miles or whatever, he loves you and something like that. I don't remember what it went. So they've planted the seed there for a while. So Miles Morales is coming in live action, and it's going to be done through Disney. So,
and that's what I mean more about Sony. If they had any brains, which I agree they don't, clearly they don't, they would stop worrying about what Marvel's doing and create a couple of movies that have something different from what Marvel is doing. There is an opening there. Yeah. It's there for DC too. I don't know whether they're going to. I mean, James Gunn, maybe we'll see. I'm not convinced of that either.
Yeah, I don't think James Gunn's going to be able to save DC.
Well, I don't think he's going to save it in the way that some people do. I think he probably will end up producing one or two really good movies. I have no trouble believing that, but I don't think it's going to be. I don't think all these movies planned are going to pan out the way people think they are. But
I'm going to wait until they come out, and then we'll have that conversation then.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I like James Gunn. I think he has good ideas on stuff. But what I'm saying is that it is clear that right now there is an opening for some other company to start making movies that are these types of movies, but not following Marvel's formula, because it clearly is not working anymore. This is the point where you strike with something unique. I agree. I don't think Sony has the inventiveness at the boardroom level to do it, but it's not that they can't. It's that they're not thinking big enough. That's my larger point. Is everybody's in Marvel's shadow, and that's over with. It's done.
For now, I think it is. With the whole multiverse thing, it's kind of like everybody's like, all right, let's get this over with. The Fantastic Four are coming, the X-Men are coming. Let's just shove all these all this Avenger stuff off to the side and just focus on something new. Because the writing, a lot of the problem with Marvel is just the writing has gone to shit, and they lack some kind, like with the Phase 1 and the original Avengers all the way up to Endgame. For the most part, they had a very large, well-gelled, cohesive idea in mind. And I mean, there was a few shitholes in that series. They can't all be good. But this phase of it, it's just been like nothing. I think Gene used to say he wanted to see a movie that would kick his ass or whatever. And none of these movies have really kicked our ass. Like,
No,
Moon Knight was pretty good, but that was a Disney Plus series.
Echo was good. I liked Echo, but that was basically
hated Echo, but that's okay.
Well, but what I liked most about it, even if you didn't like it, is it did signal that they realized that the Netflix stuff had worth, and that's why they're going back to that, because they've realized, oh no, the Netflix stuff actually had merit, because they were going to dump all that, and now suddenly they're retooling the Daredevil series. They brought all these people back that they had said, nope, they're done, because they've recognized that that worked for a lot of people, and rather than just trying to Disneyfy it all in one way, no, we have to approach different characters differently. That's an important lesson to learn.
At this point they're kind of grasping at straws, trying to figure out what they can do? And the other thing with those
same
Netflix
difference.
shows,
I don't care. Same difference.
With those shows being pulled over to the Disney Live thing, those shows are the budget on those shows is a lot cheaper to pull off, because everybody in those shows, they're super, like Iron Fist, okay, his fist glows. That's not a super expensive special effect to make anymore. Luke Cage, he was really strong. That doesn't take a whole lot of special effects to pull off. Jessica Jones, she can jump. She's really strong. Daredevil, he's really good at fighting, and all of the other stuff they can, like his special hearing senses ability. Echo, another one. That's another show where the budget probably wasn't super high, because there wasn't crazy space battles and transformations of creatures, and that right now is what Marvel needs. Marvel needs to watch their budget but still produce really good quality shows.
Sure.
Without, like, after the She-Hulk fiasco of how much money they dumped on that show and how it went in nowhere, it's like, with the Netflix shows coming along, like, here we have a chance to go back down to street level. To produce these shows is going to be a lot cheaper, and right now, that's what they need. So I'm glad they're bringing them back. I hope they still write them the same way. I hope they give Iron Fist an update. I would love to see Heroes for Hire, which they could very easily do. The blip happened. You lost your company. Now you guys are back. You're both penniless. This is your job. You're going to do Heroes for Hire. And when they were together, Luke Cage and Iron Fist on the screen, the chemistry was pretty good. I wanted to see more of that.
I absolutely agree. That was the best Iron Fist was when the two of them were together. It was like, oh, this is what this should have been the whole time.
And they had natural chemistry, and it worked.
Oh, it was fantastic. So, yes.
I feel that with better writing of Danny Rand's character, which I'm sure they'll do, that if they have better writing, and of course they're going to give him better physical training and shit like that.
Sure.
And apparently there's supposed to be multiple Iron Fists popping up. There's supposed to be another one popping up in the next Shang-Chi movie.
Yes, I think Colleen Wing is going to be an Iron Fist, which is fine because she was really good. So I'm okay with that too.
So they've got strings that they can pull on. I just hope that, they kind of had to start that whole Disney 18 plus thing where it's more mature content, which I never ever thought I would see happen, but okay, if you're going to go that route, do it right. Like, don't pull back on the Punisher. Like, the Punisher, they're doing something on there to go off on a side tangent.
I know. Yeah.
For what happened with the Punisher, since the time that show came on to now, you've got a lot of the far right wing that have kind of co-opted the Punisher logo, and they're using that. So I guess this Punisher series is going to directly deal with that. There's a whole bunch of corrupt cops, and they're wearing the Punisher logo, and the Punisher's like, no, I'm not like you people, and that's what the whole thing. And that's the statement it's making, like, you can't use this, you're not going to co-opt the skull, you're not going to co-opt what I am. Because there's a lot of cops and stuff are using that logo on their trucks, and the wrong people are taking that logo. So that was one of the big things with Disney is like, well, how are you going to do the Punisher when the Punisher skull is now so ingrained into that culture. How are you going to do this? And the other thing was, how are you going to do the Punisher where he's blowing people away with machine guns and stuff? My answer would be to make it, okay, well, he's going to be blowing away demons and non-human things, and that's why he's got so many guns. You could pull it off in that regard. But I don't know how a family-friendly company like Disney is going to have this mercenary guy running around just blowing people away with weapons like this. But we'll see what happens, you know?
Yeah, I'll wait and see. I'm curious because, in the end, let's not forget that family-friendly or not, they got to make that money back. And if it starts making money,
more content like that.
Yeah,
you know?
then they'll just say this isn't for kids. We want to have something for everybody. That's the easy answer. Is we want to have everybody have a choice on what they're watching because we believe in freedom of speech. Yay, Disney.
Yeah, and plus it's okay. Well, you got to be 18-year-olds. You got to have a code to watch it. Disney's covered. So,
yeah, of course.
Good on them. I'm glad they're doing that. I'm glad they're trying that. I'm glad they're going to go back to these more risque, darker stories and stuff. Great. Yep. I'm curious because Disney is the kind of company it is. Can they do stories like that? Can they do grittier stuff? Can they do, darker, not, I don't know how to put it. It's just, I don't know if they can do something like that, because once they acquired Fox, so you got Deadpool, like the Deadpool movie being rated R is blowing me away. It's like,
it's like I said, I think at some point they're going to realize there's money in it. And as long as they make it very clear who it's aimed for, and as long as they have something that young kids can watch and older kids can watch, I don't think they care. I think it's very easy for them to deflect that away from it being Disney and say, well, no, that's Marvel. Marvel makes adult stuff for adult people. We want to enable them to make it, but that's not Disney. Disney is Moana and all that stuff. This is Marvel. This is Marvel Knights or whatever.
How they're handling the Deadpool thing is kind of interesting. They've said that all of the Deadpool movies, if they're just Deadpool, they're going to be rated R. But when Deadpool is involved with other teams like the X-Men and the Avengers and things like that, when Deadpool is making an appearance in another movie, because they've said they're going to do that he's going to pop up in other places. But when he's in a different environment, he will be more PG-13. They'll pull it back a little bit.
I don't think there's any problem with that. I think that's going to work fine.
Yeah, I think that'll be fine too. That's great. If you can do it, great, because
in fact, I'll tell you, I like that because it makes a writer have to think a little bit. It makes them have to stretch. I can't just go to a dick joke. I have to actually make humor that can work at a different level. Well, that's good. Sometimes you have to be forced into creativity. Nothing wrong.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see how they pull that off, and I think they can. I think because Ryan Reynolds, he's got a range to be able to do that.
Works at
like
all
when they went back and did
the
PG when they redid the Deadpool movie as a Christmas story and they re-edited it down to like PG-13 or something like that. It was still a funny watch because you knew what they were doing.
Yes.
So I think it's possible, but I'm just real curious to see where they're going to go. Sony, I think Sony's shot. I don't know what Sony's going to do.
Desperation will make any company recalibrate. So it might be that too, where they just realize we're losing too much money. We either have to take a big risk, or like you said, we let the IP go. That'll tell you.
And I don't think I'm going to see. I don't see Sony doing that because they're just too greedy. There's too much money on the table for it.
Yes,
or they'll keep it out of spite, and then
maybe.
Okay,
but
we'll just make a shitty superhero movie with shitty actors.
If they're just
but they'll
the
make the movies
cheaper.
Cheaper, so if they do lose money, it won't be as big of a deal. I don't think they're going to dump the money into them like they did Madam Web or any of the other ones. They'll probably do it with Venom because it's the last Venom movie, but who knows? It's hard to say.
Well, unlike Madam Web, we can't see into the future, but we can come back and revisit this stuff and see if we were completely off the mark or not. But
and I'm game for that.
so obviously, so am I. So yeah,
maybe we'll bug Gene and say, "Hey, Gene, this is what our opinions are. What do you think? Because you're involved in the industry."
Right. Yeah. Well, on that note, we have probably arrived at a good point to wrap up this episode since we're at 2.5 hours and a little extra here, and now we're just going into pure speculation land with almost nothing to go on. So
yeah, it's pretty much it at this point. My caffeine's starting to die.
Yeah, we'll plan to come back and look at this once things start coming out, and we'll see. By all means, anybody listening, if you have any insider info or have any opinions on how this would work or what you want to see, let us know. I'm curious because this is just our thoughts on it. But it is going to be a fascinating next 3 to 5 years with every one of these companies recalibrating or redoing or changing hands or whatever. It is going to be, after a certain period of time, we're going to start to see what the ideas from each of these IP holders is. And I don't think it's just going to be what it was in the past. I think we're going to start seeing new versions of things, and we'll see what works and what doesn't. So there will be a lot to talk about. We're kind of in the middle of it now because a lot of it is going on, and we don't really know what's happening.
Well, the other thing is the stuff that we're seeing now was all filmed and done before everybody was like, wait a minute, we need to put the brakes on and change things.
That's what I'm saying. So there's a good 3 to 5 years before we're really going to know what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we'll see. But Rojan, thank you for stepping in and discussing like I said, I it's not a good film, but there are people who will be fascinated by this movie. I was riveted.
It depends on how you watch it. If you're going to sit down and watch it the way we've described it, like as a piece of like, how was this made? What was this done? Because I think there were some good decisions made, but I think they went back and just altered it too much to try to make it fit something afterwards.
Here's a fun game, especially if you're a writer or you know other creative people. Get a bunch of people together, get a couple drinks, get some notepads, and make a game out of everybody takes a 10 to 15 minute chunk of the film and writes a better version of it and compare your notes at the end. There's a fun game. Because there are at least 2 or 3 better ways to do almost any scene in this movie. Visually, it's pretty solid, but even there. But especially from the narrative, you could make a drinking game out of who has the best way to improve this scene. I firmly believe you could construct a game out of this film where people get to express their creativity, which is always good. So
I wonder if one of those people to go back and re-edit, you know how they go back and redo fan edits?
Absolutely.
Because the Kenobi one was pretty good. The Paradise one where they edited the Alien movies together was pretty good. I wonder if one of those people could save this and go back in and re-edit it in a way to try to save the movie.
I am very confident that you could improve it quite a bit. In particular, if you shortened a lot of the first half, you would make the Cassie Webb character more likable. Cut a lot of the awkward, weird, specifically anti-children stuff out, and she becomes a better character just by excising her reactions and her hatred for children. Just cut it down.
It would probably be a half hour shorter, but might be worth it.
that alone is a benefit. So yes, by all means, everybody, take this movie and do stuff with it. Do something better. It won't take much. But on that note, again, Rojan, thank you for stopping by.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll come back once we have some more stuff to talk about, because I'm sure there will be more in the future. I don't have spider powers, so I can't tell you what it'll be, everybody, but I'm pretty sure there will be something of interest. Until that time, don't pay $20 to rent Madame Web. Wait for it to come out on a streaming service or Tubi or something, and then make your drinking game. It's not worth $20. I could say that with confidence. Outside of that, watch something that you get some type of entertainment out of. Go watch Wide World of Batwoman. It's free on YouTube, and it is...
Wild World? I think it's Wild World.
Is it Wild? Wild
I think
or
it's
Wide?
Wild.
Whatever it is, it's from 1966. You'll find it. Look it up. I linked to it in my review, so you can go watch it. That is a better constructed movie in terms of the characterization than this one is.
Yeah, it's Wild Woman. It's Wild World of Batwoman.
Okay,
What it
go
is.
watch Wild World of Batwoman. If you watch this, watch that next, because that will be fun to laugh at, because Batgirl 14 is going to report a crime and then do nothing about it. On that note, enjoy your weekend. Talk to you next week. Visit OzoneNightmare.com to subscribe to new episodes, browse through our back catalog, or to find links to support the show. Follow @OzoneNightmare on Twitter for the latest episode postings and other show information. If 280 characters just isn't enough, you can always email us, theozonenightmare@gmail.com. The opening theme for the show is provided by Heartbeat Hero. The closing theme is provided by Ogre. Please visit and support these artists using the links in the show notes for each episode.